it'd be a brutal course and race when the eritrean does today.
It's certainly can. That's the route we're looking at. Starting marsh in Famenne, head out in a easterly direction. And we take seven climbs, in fact. And then we head into the finishing circuit. So 116 kilometre loop, and then we commence 3 24-kilometre circuits, as you can see there, in and around Marsh in Famenne itself. Taking in on every occasion the and this race passes through several regions in terms of areas of Wallonia. But the starting is Luxembourg province. So this is an absolutely stunning area. UNESCO World Heritage Site, known as the Famenne UNESCO Global Geopark. But right now looking at breakaway, and as you can see, 87.9 kilometres to go. Not quite to the finishing circuit just yet. We are gently wending our way west, and as you can see, there's just eluding classic Belgian conditions. It does feel as if we're in the start of the season on the back end. The Belgian race before the main teams to take a phrase from LDL, which you can see in about a week's time on GCM Plus, of course. Breakaway cage of the human-powered health 2024 American. We've got Tim Marsman of the Metec Solomon team. The Continental squad from the Netherlands. Then now cycling represented in an orange jersey that's covered up by a rain cape. We've got Zian of the Volker cycling team. And also we've got Matt Teggett, the Irish rider from some British Continental team. Freshly couple of weeks ago, in fact, back at a very competitive Britain and the team that are chasing around the market into Marche want to go. So conditions here, super cold, but already we're seeing the team that are determined to get results. Unsurprisingly, Intermarché doing the chasing with Lotto. Significance. As you can see, a castle there. But the battlements. Actually, Famenne is a city originally a city back in the Middle Ages. There are still small bits of evidence of that. Was actually dismantled in the late 1700s. It is the city today. So getting a good shot here. Matt Teggett. Closely riding. You know, he was very impressive. I think it's just dwelling on how well sung in the turn until it was all stopped early in the race. So we know so well. Really impressed with the way we've sung God of ridden this season and he's been riding really well. So they're a team that are totally unafraid to get stuck in, aren't they?
I was going to say, two really strong Irish riders. Teggett has been, riding out of his skin this season. He did a great ride in Tour of Britain. As did the whole team, as you say. They were just up there. They seem to be really firing all cylinders whenever they show up to a race, wherever and whenever that may be. And it's great to see a UK-based continental domestic team really kind of punching a bit above their weight in a way. Teggett's made himself into the early breakaway here. Good move to be in, because I think this race is potentially going to split up quite early and be kind of just as hard in the peloton as it is in the break sometimes, and you have this weather and these twisty, narrow roads and short, sharp hills. Great to see him up there. He's had a great year too. He's kind of been pretty consistent the whole way through this season, just consecutively getting those top 10 results and riding strongly from the very start in Turkey, I believe, from the very start of the season. So yeah, it'd be great to see him get up there again today, and who knows, this breakaway could stand a chance. You know, when the weather's this unpredictable and the bunch starts to line itself out, as we see right now, and the unexpected can happen, be willing them on. But Rory Townsend, another rider who's been going strong too, Irish national champion, I'm sure he'll be doing all he can to save energy back in the bunch and potentially get a result in the sprint at the end if it comes to that.
Indeed. Yeah. Just looking at the composition of this field, as we're alluding to, it has some really classy riders, but as it is a 1.1 race, there's a real spread of teams. We've got, well, for a 1.1 race, 6 World Tour teams is going to please the organisers, that is for sure. And we know the reason for that. It's a much disputed system, this World Tour relegation system that's basically on a 3-year cycle. It's coming to the end of year 1 now, and a couple of teams will be relegated from the World Tour now down to pro team level, and one of those teams that's looking very, very likely to face the drop, Israel Premier Tech and a Lotto Soudal. Despite having a lot of wins, they haven't had a great season in terms of World Tour points, but they've scored wins across the board, with Arnaud Dely with 9 wins there. But they've got a real strong team here. But I think despite the fact that it does look like they're going to face the drop, and there's been a lot of talk about it in the press, that there might be some slight changes over the coming seasons in relation to how the point system actually works, they're still determined to try, aren't they? I mean, because they've battled, but it's been, their tactics have been quite different. Rather than just trying to win the race, although they have had wins, it's more about stacking riders in the top 10. So we've seen some really different racing, especially towards the back end of the year, as teams try and gather these points.
Yeah, that's what it's all been about, really, in this last few months of the year. And as you look at kind of the points that are available in these one-day races, it does tend to be the fact that if you just stack your riders in the top 10, you can kind of earn more points just by getting, you know, a second, a fourth, a seventh, than getting the win. And that is kind of one of the points I think people have been arguing a little bit, that it's shifted the emphasis away from winning bike races to something slightly different. I think it is what it is. I think teams have known about how this point system is going to play out. It's been that kind of age-old thing of once you're in it, it's like, oh gosh, we're in a bit of a points battle today. I'm not sure what we're going to do about it. But yeah, there's still points available, still these one-day races to race hard and try and get those results, those all-important results.
Indeed. Well, 82 Ks to go, 2 minutes and 36 for our breakaway of 5 riders. Welcome to our broader Eurosport family. Joining us here at the Famenne Ardenne Classic. This is the 4th edition of this race. A relatively new race, as you would expect. Started back in 2017. You're looking at a breakaway here. And there was no additions in 2021 or 2020. But we've got a great field assembled for this very young race, held in the Wallonia region of Belgium. Undulating terrain, classic Belgian conditions, and on your screen we have a breakaway of 5 riders. Cage Hecht is there for the human-powered health team, the American squad, riding at pro team level. We've got Tim Marsman of the Metec Solar Watt team. We've also got Emil Melchior-Vinjbo of the Rival cycling team in the mix as well. Michael Zielard is there in the black and blue of the Volker Vessels cycling team from the Netherlands, and also in the mix Matt Teggett, and also Mark Stewart is in the breakaway as well, a rider we didn't identify earlier on. Mark Stewart, the British rider, riding for the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro cycling team. Watch out for Aaron Gate, the Commonwealth Games road champion for that team. He has had a very, very good season indeed. And just to reintroduce my compatriot today, a man in the breakaway hot seat with me commentating, it is Conor Dunn, Global Cycling Network presenter and of course former Irish national road race champion. It is absolutely pouring down here, classic Belgian conditions. I bet, Conor, you're happy sat in the booth rather than riding today.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I am slightly smug, actually, looking at these pictures. I did love a good rainy race. I did used to love it, but at the same time, it is tough, especially if you're on a bit of an off day as well. You just see how this race is getting lined out already. I think Lotto Soudal, they've been working on the front, and every time you go through these little twisty sections, they're really trying to kind of accelerate a bit and make things hard for the riders who are caught out behind. And it's those sort of accelerations which kind of give me a cold shiver down my spine of being caught out at the back and suffering in the cold and the rain. But it's great to watch. It makes for fantastic racing. I'm sure we'll have an absolutely thrilling race on our hands today.
I'm sure we will. It does look grim. As I say, it's around 13 degrees, but with that little bit of wind that's blowing and, of course, the rain that has fallen, it will feel a lot colder there. I think I just saw it was the figure of Chad Hager, the American rider for Human Powered Health, in the black jersey there riding the orange bike, just shaking his arms out, trying to get the blood circulating to his fingertips a little bit better. I was a rider that particularly, well, I didn't cope well in the rain and cold weather, and quite often I used to get very, very cold hands, and one method to try and get the blood circulating is to shake your hands out. But just going back to the composition of the field, we've got 6 World Tour teams here. Intermarché Want Gobert, Lotto Soudal doing the chasing right now. Cofidis are represented. AG2R are also here, Israel Premier Tech and Trek Segafredo. And we also have 6 pro teams stacked in this field. Team Arkea Samsic, Alpecin de Koning, Sport Vlaanderen, Bengal Pal Sources in that fluo yellow kit, and Human Powered Health, as well as Total Energies. And then we've got 8 teams at essentially the 3rd division continental squads. That's the Minerva cycling team, Volker Vessel cycling team, Red Sungop from the UK, Beat Cycling, Metec Solawatt, Riwal cycling team, and all the way from New Zealand, the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro cycling team. That is a real mouthful. But they are a decent team, and they have representation in this move. And there is there's the composition of this breakaway again. Hecht, Zilliard, Teget, Marsman, Minbo, and also Stewart. And the British rider, it is Teget just rolling through at the moment. And it won't be too long, Connor, before we start to hit. We get a good glimpse of this finishing circuit. We do 3 full laps, taking in the Côte des Rois. Now, if you've ridden this race before, you'll know the Côte des Rois. Or did it take this same route the last time you rode it, Connie? Can you give us a bit of insight if you know the climb?
If I'm really honest, Matt, I think I was actually deposed of in this race before we hit the Côte des Rois.
Fair enough.
I had a tough year that season, and
fair enough, mate.
I was running on fumes by the end, and I got to this one, I was kind of going good, bad, and I had a real bad day.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, mate.
No, it's okay. It brings back memories. But yeah, as I said before, it's good to be watching this one rather than in it, because it is a tough course. But I think it's going to be kind of your typical racing one in the Ardennes. It's hard going, you know. For those of you in the UK, perhaps it's similar to something up in Yorkshire even. It's just those tough climbs, lots of the descending. That's actually almost the hardest part, is those twisty, narrow descents, and you just kick straight back up the next one without much recovery, and just fighting to be on the wheels. And then when you have the weather thrown in like this as well, it's all for a proper hard day in the saddle.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, we'll take on the Côte des Rois very shortly, actually. The final ascent of there's actually King of the Mountains awarded at 7 climbs today, most of which we passed over in the earlier part of the race. But the Côte des Rois is in fact 2.3 k's long, averaging 4.8%, so more of a longish drag. But I think, given the weather conditions we've got, and given what's at stake, I do think that the field will be reduced. Difficult to call in relation to whether this will end up in a bunch sprint or not, but I think if it does come down to a group finish, it will be drastically reduced. We've got 2 previous winners in this race as we look a little bit further down the field. It's one of the Intermarché riders dropping back. This is Dimitri Claes. In fact, he was the winner of this event back in 2019, ahead of Baptiste Plancard and Timo Rosen. And the year before that, it was Guillaume Boivin, who is riding now for the Israel Premier Tech team, is the current Canadian road race champion. And the inaugural edition of this race back in 2017 was won by Moreno Hofland. So absolutely awful conditions here. Riders just dropping out to making sure they're kept nice and warm. But it won't be too long before we hit the finishing circuits here in Marche in Famenne. Absolutely stunning shot there, Connor, of a moated. Well, it's more than a gîte, isn't it? It's absolutely lovely. Absolutely stunning stuff. Looks like one of the ones we stayed in a few years ago at GCN. Look at that. There
Incredible,
we go.
Isn't it?
Right on cue, they've given us the title of it. That's the Château de Gimep. Very, very nice indeed. Certainly well-kept gardens as well. It is a beautiful part of the world. As you said, it's a really good comparison, actually. Up and down, very technical. We saw some pretty narrow country lanes that the riders were passing through. And in these wet conditions, that is one of the hardest things, as you see Matt Teggett. Not too sure if Matt Teggett's actually been dropped here, or it looks like he is, actually. Or he's had a bit of a mechanical and is trying to get back in contact. But Teggett, difficult to see exactly what has gone on here. He looks relatively comfortable here, though, Connor, but difficult to know exactly what's gone on. But in these sorts of conditions, even on a long drag, if you have, it looks like he's actually getting detached here on a long drag.
Yeah, I think he's losing contact there. We're kind of 100k in now, so it is starting to take its toll. And when you've been riding in this weather for so long in the cold temperatures, nothing on the legs, and it can, it can just hit you like that. The cold is like a hammer, and it's quite deceptive. Even just looking at the TV pictures, it's deceptive to see the gradients of the actual road, because I always found that even when I was racing in Wally, you were on these big wide highways. And you were like, why am I suffering so much? And then when you actually analyse the gradient you're riding on, it's a proper climb. And they're long, these climbs too. So yeah, it can be tough going. And if you're not on quite perfect form, it hits you just like that.
It certainly does. Well, we shall pass through the finish line very shortly, in about 4Ks. And the gap is slowly coming down, 2 minutes and 31 seconds. And it's right, Connor, it's a very, riders deal with the cold and the hot conditions in completely different ways. It certainly isn't a constant. But the very cold weather, and we wouldn't call this very cold, it's still double digits, but with that added wind chill and that pouring rain, you are going to get the muscles cope very differently. And quite often, you might not necessarily feel overly fatigued, but quite often your legs just feel blocked, almost like pieces of wood. So your heart rate might be relatively low and you're breathing fine, but you just cannot find the power, regardless of the gears you use, to actually move the bike forward. It's quite a strange feeling, and you only feel it in cold weather.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's like the acceleration we just saw there from the breakaway when Taggart was just having a bit of difficulty hanging on. You're kind of cruising, you're doing your through and off as normal, and then you have like a bit of an acceleration, a bit of a steeper climb, and you have to push that bit harder, and suddenly you realise your legs just aren't quite working in the way you want them to. Your muscles are that cold. Your brain just wants you to go forward, but it's just not doing its usual job, and it can be so frustrating and almost bewildering in a way. And we've spoken already about how this weather can make the race harder. I think the way it differs to spring is that when you have the spring classics, you have that kind of typical rainy Belgian weather, but at the same time you've trained throughout the whole winter, so you've had that cold weather and you're used to it. Whereas when you get it in the autumn in these races, the weather does change quite quick here in the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, a few weeks ago we had really hot, totally. High 20s degrees Celsius. So you're used to that warm weather, and suddenly you get put into a race like this, and it's that contrast which your body does struggle with, which can make it pretty challenging. Yeah,
it's a good way to describe it. I've noticed, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, I was sat on the patio in the garden, almost getting sunburned, and now, as you say, the weather has changed. There we go, 2 kilometres to go now. This is our first glimpse of the run-in to the finishing line. They actually carry quite a lot of pace into the last kilometre, then it drags up to the line. So this will be the first time we can see that. As you can see, they're losing elevation, essentially into a bowl, and then back out again. Not super technical, but again, even these relatively wide roundabouts at speed in these wet conditions, because of the stopping distances, because riders will be just dropping off the wheel a little bit, it can be very, very sketchy indeed. And as Connor was talking about, the worst place to be is at or near the back when you're suffering. You're constantly just fighting to get back in contact. As they accelerate out the front, you're essentially decelerating at the back into the corners, and it's just a chasing game, isn't it? And quite often when you're back there, you can only take so much punishment. It's like a series of although you're still a part of the bunch, you're doing a series of intervals just to maintain your position in the bunch. And if you've got sore legs, that's why we see this whittling down process, especially on a circuit like this.
Yeah, it can be really horrific, and you almost get stuck in like a vicious cycle of doing these efforts just to stay on the wheels, and then you know you need to move to the front, but you can't because you've been doing these intervals just to stay in contention, and you have to almost take a breath and build yourself up to even try and make your way back to the front and get out of that vicious cycle, which you know is just depleting your energy. But at the moment, you can't do anything about it. You see the breakaway here just approaching the finish line as they come into town.
Yeah, they've just gone through the Flamme Rouge, taken that right-hander, and I think you can just see up ahead, the road bends ever so slightly just to the left-hand side, but it's a long drag, as you can see, not super steep, around 2 or 3%. And there we go, 300 metres to go. You can just see that board on the right-hand side. So we've got a finishing straight of around 800 metres long. Great shot here of our 6-man breakaway coming in to pass through the finish line for the first time. Then there'll be 3 laps to go. So those of you watching the coverage on GCN Plus or even on the Player or Discovery Plus, ad-free, which is wonderful. So you get to hear me and Connor waffling on about this wet bike race for an extra 3 minutes. And there we go, the breakaway. Just winding their way up through. They should actually pick up a little bit of a tailwind here, as far as my I can look. So we've got this west to east wind blowing, and on the final part of the finishing circuit, it's a crosswind. And as they turn back into town, they actually pick up ever such a slight tailwind on the finishing straight. But that's one long drag, though, isn't it? Sometimes they can be quite stressful ones, can't they? Especially we've got a long, quite a wide finishing straight with that little bit of a tailwind. But to see the finish line for 800 metres, it's a really interesting sort of finish, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's almost quite technical, that little descent into town there and those twisty kind of city streets as the peloton are navigating them now. And with the rain as well, all the surface water on the roads, it's going to be a technical one if there's a big group coming to the finish line there. It does look like Matthew Teggart has been distanced from that breakaway. I was hoping he potentially had a mechanical, but I didn't see him in the front group there anymore. So unfortunately, it looks like he's had a bit of a bad day, a bit of an off day, because I think he's been riding so strongly, especially in the Tour of Britain, that I think he must have had a bit of an issue today.
Yep, it certainly looks like it, doesn't it? But yeah, Teggart was originally a part of that breakaway. And we're just looking at the town hall, rather modern town hall by the looks of things. It is quite a small city here, Marche en Famenne, but has some really interesting features. And as I say, the area with it lies is a UNESCO Global Geopark. As we just see the aforementioned Irishman rolling through the finishing line, the gap to the peloton 2:22 and closing. But he's just getting the job done now, isn't he? Certainly not backed off massively, but there we go. There is that right-hander. Just on that little zebra crossing there, a couple of riders have come down. One rider from Arkea Samsic and another from Sport Vlaanderen. Again, that's another element, isn't it? Canting the bike over, just banking the bike over ever so slightly and hitting those zebra crossings can be very, very dangerous indeed. And that looks to me, Connor, as if that what might have happened there.
Yeah, it's those kind of white lines and the little technical city streets in Belgium. They're so difficult to navigate, even in the best of conditions. And when the rain's pouring like this, it just makes it that bit harder. When you see those little crashes happen, to me, it's always a sense that it's getting a bit more nervous in the peloton. So I think you're going to start to see the pace really hotting up and riders really fighting for position now.
Yep. Up this long drag, the peloton being led at the moment. Looks like the figure of Loic Vliegen always rides well in Wallonia. Dragging the peloton up. The gap now 2:08, 71 k's to go. So 70.9 kilometres to go. And the weary peloton winched themselves up this long drag, and they will have just seen 3 laps to go. So we're now commencing the shorter finishing circuits. 3 laps of 24 k's. Here's that crash again. Actually, they were already down by the time the camera picked them up, but just looking at the way they've laid it down there, it does look as if it was either on the white lines, as we said. So, and it was the The rider Marcus Pajor, the Estonian, 22 years of age, for Arkea Samsic, is trying to get back in contact, but that's, again, looks laboured, doesn't he? Unsurprisingly, he's hit the deck. Probably lost around a minute or so, and you can just see this weather really playing its part. I know we don't know what these riders are thinking or feeling, but just by the laboured way that they're riding, Connor, that's the weather condition, that's the cold getting into the muscles. There's not that fluidity and crispness of the pedal stroke that you normally get when you've got normal or warm conditions.
Yeah, the race has definitely taken its toll already. You know, 110k done in these conditions is a long way to go on your bicycle. And sometimes it's hard in the peloton because you have those easier moments when the brake goes away and everyone settles down for a bit, you let the gap go out and you just get cold. You're not riding hard enough to keep your body warm and you're trying to get the layers on it, but if you do lose that body heat, it's so hard to get it back, and if you do get it back, it almost costs you energy. I find it's energy that you could be using to ride your bike harder has been used up keeping yourself warm, and if that happens enough times, it does take a few kind of few bits of chunks out of you, and then you start to notice that at this stage of the race, and I think that's why you're starting to see riders so laboured. Plus the parkour as well. It's just these, you know, these routes that you're up and down. There's no recovery whatsoever. It really is a tough day out, and I think this lap, you know, we've seen the gap come down to potentially around 1 minute 45 there, back to the peloton from the breakaway. I'm feeling this lap that we're going to see a few more riders going into difficulties.
Yep, I think you're right. And there's a few weary faces. Just looking at a very impressive ride here by Mark Stewart of the Bolton Equities team. It's a really good year, Mark Stewart. He's 27 years of age, has been around a little while, but he's already had a couple of wins. He won the overall in the New Zealand Cycle Classic. He won the Tour Romana as well this year, as well as third overall in the new Tour of Greece, the International Tour of Hellas. So he's a great rider. And is happy to try and help the chance of this group, but it is coming down slowly but surely. Interestingly, still only two teams on the front, Intermarché Wanty Gobert and Lotto Soudal. As we look at our breakaway, it's worth drilling down and have a look at a couple of riders that might do well today. Obviously we've got Bini Minkamai here, 4 wins this year, has had a superb season, clearly in good form. Maybe not the ride he wanted in the World Championships, but he has to be one of the clear favourites today, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. It'd be great to see him get up there and get a result. He's been riding strongly so far. I've just been noticing him keeping himself really well positioned at the front, and he's riding quite well, plenty of attention just to keep himself out of the bits of trouble which may start to develop, as we've seen already, just through the finish zone. But yeah, I think this is a course that suits him. You know, he's got that strong sprint. He can climb, he can get over these climbs in good shape. And if the weather, you know, doesn't get into his bones as it would with me, then I think he's going to be quite hard to beat by the finish. Arnaud Delis, though, Lotto Soudal really chasing those points, and he'll be really fired up for this race too. Lotto Soudal already riding well at the front, keeping Delis well positioned, which counts for a lot in these sort of races. You don't want to find yourself at the back in these conditions, and on this sort of parkour, it just does wear you down and you waste so much energy. But when you look at other places on the start sheet, Matt, there's some big names. I mean, the likes of Greg Van Avermaet, the Narsson brothers, Oliver Narsson, Lawrence Narsson, they could be ones for a result today. Plus, if you look at Arkea Samsic, Connor Swift, it'd be great to see him get up there. Yeah,
definitely. It's a good field, it really, really is. We're just seeing Matthew Tiggett there, the Irishman from with Sun God, the British team, just being caught. He was originally part of that breakaway. He's just glancing around and wondering if he'll try and stay in the bunch for a while. I'm sure he will. He'll have a team role to play. And as long as there's something he can do and he's got the legs, I would imagine he'll hang in as long as he can. Teams are far more organised than they used to be. So if there's a job that he can do, for example, especially for Rory Townsend, he'll do it before getting dropped off. And that was interesting to see him having a look around there, maybe trying to spot his teammate. But after such a long time in front, I'm not too sure how long Tiggett will last. As we look at our breakaway now, well into this finishing circuit, and just glancing at the profile, you're quite right, Connor, there is hardly any flat at all. They're either descending or climbing, and there are 3, aside from the climb of the Côte de Roi itself, at 2.3 k's in length and just under 5% in gradients. There are 3 other distinct climbs on this 24-kilometre circuit. It's a classic Wallonia circuit, and it will be a real slow wearing down process. Add into the mix these awful weather conditions, it's going to be a challenging one. But saying that, the breakaway have pulled a few more seconds out. So back up to 2:21 now. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the peloton almost accelerated a bit through the finish there, just trying to position themselves for the upcoming climbs, and the gap just kind of tumbled a little bit, but breakaway seemed to be working well together and managing to maintain that gap just over 2 minutes, which is pretty good going at this stage of the race, and they'll do well to keep maintaining that, because I think things will start to split up behind. I think it's just going to be that hard a day that I can't see the peloton staying in too large a group, to be honest, as we get through these circuits. But I may be proved wrong. But as you say, there is just no flat, and it's almost like you get no recovery on the descents with the weather the way it is, because you're trying to keep warm on the climb, then you descend and you start to get cold again, and you start another climb with cold legs. And by the nature of the twistiness of the course, it's just so hard to get back on top of the gear. You go around those bends, start another climb, and you're sprinting out of them onto another ascent. It is challenging.
As you say, with the cold conditions on a circuit like this, it really does offer up a different sort of bike race. And also there'll be some riders, we talked about the problems a lot of riders has, whereas on the other hand, some riders function exceptionally well. They're almost optimal in this sort of weather. I would guess though that the vast majority of the field, or 3/4 of the field, have looked out the window this morning and thought, okay, this isn't great. But a small percentage would have actually rolled up their sleeves and thought, okay, I really like to get stuck in. I'm certainly sure there's less riders that like these horrible conditions that actually don't. But we shall see. But yeah, 2:32 now. So I think you're quite right. Positioning for that slightly technical run into the line. And that's a long push-up by Loic Vliegen. Closed the gap considerably. But I certainly think they've backed off. Still a long way to go here. Still about an hour and 15, maybe an hour and 20 minutes of racing. So 66 Ks to go. And a 5-man group out in front are enjoying a gap at the moment of 2 minutes and 31 seconds. And this is the climb for the first time of the Côte du Roi. So this is our first glimpse of the Côte du Roi. 2.3 Ks. You're going to know about this one, aren't they? I always found, again, we're going to keep on banging out about the cold weather. I think it's important. I always found it very hard when climbing, even in decent form, to find the right rhythm, Connor, or even the right cadence to ride out on a climb like this, when my legs just weren't quite optimised, even though I might have been in good form. As the body doesn't function, I always laboured on climbs in the cold weather.
Yeah, it can be tough, and it's almost easier in a way on like longer alpine mountain climbs when you have that feeling of the cold in your legs at the start, but you kind of get yourself into a rhythm and you warm yourself up, and then you kind of find your pace. But on a route like this, when you have those short, sharp climbs, you have those fast descents where the cold does get into you. I mean, some of these riders are already wearing skin suits, and trying to get every gain possible in the breakaway. You descend down, you get cold, and then you're on a 2.3 kilometre climb. It's not too long an effort, and by the time you get to the top, you're already descending again. So there isn't really a whole heap of time to get yourself warmed up into it. And this climb is going to be really decisive. I think it's going to be a big launch pad for any riders looking to get away from the peloton and really spice things up. And the fact it's so open, you can see to the bottom of the climb as you're attacking. I think it's going to make a few riders' heads drops when they see some savage attacks going up the road.
Indeed. Well, actually, I was wrong. This is the second ascent of the Côte du Roi. We did ascend it earlier on before we dropped down on to the finishing circuit itself. So we've got 3 more ascents up this climb. There are King of the Mountains points on offer for this ascent and the next one. But the final time up the Côte du Roi, there will be no point on offer. And there's another casualty here. The rider dropping off the back is Michiel Ziad of the Volker Vessel cycling team, 23 years of age, from the Netherlands. And again, starting to labour. Looks to be, from that group as well, one of the slightly larger riders, slightly heavier rider, starting to struggle. Again, as you can see, doesn't look to be in a lot of distress from what we can see on his face. It's just he hasn't got anything left to give. And so we only have 4 riders out in front. And considering I think we've got about 1,500 metres of that climb still to go, I would imagine it's going to be very difficult for him to get back in contact now, Connor.
Yeah, I think someone's really pushing the pace on in this breakaway, because that's the second rider now we've seen drops relatively early. Normally you'd be kind of looking to keep that group together as long as possible, but I think one rider's on a really good day up there and causing a few difficulties for the others, but it's paying off them because they're keeping that gap at around 2.5 minutes.
Well, this is Boivin just on the back, the former Canadian road race champion and the winner of this race in 2018. So 2 previous winners are here. Dimitri Claes, we saw him earlier, but that was Boivin. Seika got back in contact. And then there were 4. So Hecht, Marsman, Vinbo and Stewart are our 4 riders left in front, still enjoying a lead of 2 minutes and 35 seconds. So the peloton wending their way up this climb. Not the longest climb of the day. We had a couple of long ones earlier on. Quite a fair bit of elevation in the early part of this race. We had the Côte de Nassau early on, that was 4 k's long. And then we had the 3.7 kilometre long Côte de Varisy. And then we've got 4 ascents of the Côte de Roi. This is the second time up this climb, and interestingly now we've got another team moving through to the front, and that's just some positioning play. Now this is a bit of a launch here, some pressure being applied by Sport Vlaanderen, and a couple of little gaps starting to open up now, and they're not being sewn back together particularly quickly, but interesting that Sport Vlaanderen, not represented in the break, are starting to apply some pressure now, Connor.
Yeah, it looks like a few attacks starting to go. I was kind of half expecting it because everyone was looking so tired. I think it's been a tough first 100k for these riders, and with the weather, as we've spoken about, this is the launch pad, you know, and if you want to mix things up and not play into the hands of the teams who are looking to bring this to a sprint, now's the time to kind of put in a few attacks and see what might happen, because if you get a strong group going here, you can get away easily, 64k to go. Riders can let their head drop, and then that's it, you're away. So it definitely is worth giving it a go at this stage of the race.
It certainly is. You just never know what might happen. And one of the casualties of that acceleration moving out the back of the bunch is Sebastian Gringard. He was doing a lot of riding earlier on, and actually since we've been on air, he was one of the Lotto Soudal riders who was pushing a lot. I'm wondering if they'll use Victor Campenaerts, because Campenaerts, in these sorts of conditions, if you look at some of the best wins of Campenaerts' career, primarily they were time trial wins, but in recent years he started to excel on the road a little bit more and is focusing on the classics. But his big win in the Giro a couple of years back was in conditions like this, and Victor Campenaerts would definitely be an option as we see the riders now dropping off the back of the peloton in 1s or 2s, and this is going to be the pattern of the race. And that was only not taking anything away from the rider from Sport Vlaanderen. It was only the first acceleration that we've really seen, and this is Kevin van Melsen, who's also been dropped up this long drag, not particularly steep, but certainly enough to cause some damage. So we've still got another 2 ascents after this one, Connor, too. So a lot of riders starting to struggle now.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't think we're going to see too many finishes today. I think this is going to be a real kind of attritional race, and at this stage to see so many riders going out the back, it's testament to how fast the pace is in the bunch and how hard this race has been so far. It's going to take its toll, and if attacks don't go here, I think next time round definitely going to be some serious moves going off the front. Speak about Campenaerts, I think definitely he's a rider for today. I think Lotto Soudal, arguably, you know, they're going to go with the strategy of trying to place as many riders up there as possible, so I don't think they're going to go all in for Ardenne. I potentially think that Campenaerts will be given a bit of a free rein to follow those moves and see where he ends up, because he's definitely strong enough to take the win today, or if that, get on the podium.
No, definitely. I think you're quite right. And Baptiste Plancart just there. He's been on the podium in this race before for Intermarché, sat third wheel. And Victor Campenaerts has actually dropped back a little bit, so he's not doing any of the pace setting. One thing we haven't spoken about, Cofidis. Watch out for Axel Zongle, the Frenchman. He's had a couple of good wins this year. So they haven't got an out-and-out sprinter for this race, but Zongle is a rider that can sprint from a small group. And Israel Premier Tech, as you talked about a few moments ago, they've got the previous winner, Boivin of Canada, but they've also got Jantje Biermans, who's very quick. They've got Sepp van Mark and Jacques Mendozzolo. So in terms of teams with options, I would actually say on paper that Israel Premier Tech have got the most options in terms of any given race situation. They've got riders that can win from a small group, win solo, and also win from a big group as well. So and they are still chasing points, although it does appear, I think, that they are going to be facing relegation, but they have brought a very strong team to this race.
Yeah, Tom van Asbroek, the Belgian rider too, he loves these end-of-season races. So really every rider they brought to the start line is capable of getting a result today. So yeah, as you say, still chasing points, still trying to keep themselves up there in this relegation battle. As you said, doesn't look like they're potentially facing relegation. Although I imagine most teams are just looking to score as many points as they can until the very end, and then see what the situation is, see what the state of play is when all things are said and done. But yeah, in terms of the race today, I think they're definite contenders for the victory. So about Mark, he's been almost having a bit of a resurgence in recent months. He's been getting some really nice results, and I was commentating on the Canadian races in Quebec and Montreal a few weeks back, and he looked really strong there as well. Didn't quite get a result, but he was always up there and following moves. So I think today is the sort of course he likes, and he'll definitely be looking to get another victory.
Yeah, he certainly will. There we go. It's quite an interesting little technique there. I'm not too sure what they're
asking for the time to the
asking for the time. Yeah, it could be asking. I thought he was pointing to the brand on his gloves, but I think it's right. He could have been asking for the time. That, of course, was Vingegaard, the Dane riding for the Rival cycling team. And there is the peloton. Riders in ones and twos being dropped. And there's a rider trying to get across the gap. Yeah, this is indeed. We saw a couple of riders attacking. Certainly one clear on his own from Sport Vlaanderen. That's the rider that's been dropped from the group is Ziliard, and that is one of the riders from Sport Vlaanderen, Balois, now trying to get himself across to the move, and he looks to be doing a very effective job, really on top of that big gear. Visibly moving quicker than the rider that he's just passed. 60 k's to go now. And there are some riders that will like these conditions. One of the riders back a few years ago, I mean, Ian Stannard, I know he's long retired, but as soon as it was cold, and Mats Pedersen is another rider who absolutely loves these weather conditions. Hardly ever rides on the turbo trainer indoors. If it's cold and wet, he just gets out. That's what he's used to. But some riders absolutely revel and excel in these weather conditions, and it gives them a real advantage, doesn't it?
It does, and you can see the advantage right now, because that's a pretty good attack to go at this stage of the race and go solo. I think he'd have liked to bring another rider with him. At the same time, he's opened up a good gap there, and I always admired Sport Vlaanderen for this. They always seem to have this kind of knack or ability of finding when was the best moment to attack in a race, and they almost get ahead of the curve and start firing riders off before the action really starts up, and they always have someone there. It's just unbelievable how they managed it. So that is a good sign to me that we're going to see a few more attacks to come, but he's done well there to slip away on his own as we see the breakaway tackle. Bit of a descent here around that corner. You can see how the road just goes so slick. So many places you've got to concentrate on these roads, and it's so easy to make an error and find yourself on the ground.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, traction on the corners. I mean, they'll know this finishing, this is the opening lap. But they actually knew this little bit of a run-in, so this part of the course they'll have ridden on before. But the gap is holding steady now for our four riders out in front. Long, hard turn on the front by Gage Hecht of the United States. But just over 58 k's to go. So 2:33 for our breakaway at Vingegaard. That's our first look. It is indeed Kenneth Van Rooij who is trying to get across the gap. Not too sure exactly how far he is behind, but Group 3 on your screen, as you can see there, at 2:31. That is the peloton, and that Kenneth Van Rooij is currently in between. It was an impressive attack. He certainly opened up a decent lead. Let's just pan back and see exactly the sort of gap that the Belgian has opened up. But Van Rooij, he's probably got about 20 seconds there, so it's not a too big a gap. But he's had reasonable form at the moment. 4th in the Primus Classic, 11th overall in the Tour of Britain, 3rd in Scarcel, so he's clearly in good form. He clearly likes these conditions. But again, sometimes when we see riders doing a move like this at this stage of the race, when there's still a breakaway, you would have imagined, as you pointed out, Connor, that he probably would have wanted to take in a couple of riders with him, but it hasn't happened. But once you're committed, you can't just ease up and go back to the bunch. You're almost like, oh well, I've just got to go now and just see what happens and see if that will provide a catalyst for the next phase of racing to start.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what that sort of attack does is riders in the peloton see it, and it's a bit of a stepping stone. So if you want to attack yourself, you've got someone to jump to, and you know someone's there who's going to work you straight away. Whereas Kenneth Van Rooij's had to go on his own. He's found himself in that situation where he's solo. He's pushing on. Fair play to him. But it is a tough ask for 57 Ks. It also does show that the team's controlling on the front. Lotto Soudal into Marseille. It's tough going for them as well. It's tough to keep this race together, and if you're seeing riders start to jump across and start to look to liven the race up, it shows that they're having a hard time keeping things together. As we see a rider from Intermarché just struggling on the back here. I was trying to pick out his number, Kevin Van Melsen. So you can see the effect the acceleration of the peloton has at the riders behind you on this descent. Really tricky part, and as you come onto this main road, gaps starting to open up.
That's it, you could just see him accelerating, but then he's got to slow down again and accelerate again out of that corner. But it's a lot easier when you're in front. And also just looking at the move of Kenneth Van Rooij trying to get across. Maybe he's clearly thinking he's got good legs. It might have been a ploy by the team. I doubt that he would have actually done that without speaking to the rest of his teammates. These riders won't act completely in isolation. But maybe he's thinking that he'd rather be in front because of how technical this course is, how hard it is, build up a little bit of a lead, and then if there is a selection, if he builds himself a minute's lead and the racing happens behind, quite often by investing, although he's about to be caught now, just saying that, he's about to come back to the bunch, so I'll take all that back. But quite often it can be done. You can make a bit of a move, and if there's a selection behind, you end up at the front of the race. But because of the pace being set behind, he has been retaken, and it is Intermarché want to go Gobert on the front. So Kenneth Van Rooij's brief tenure in the gap, Chasse Patate, in no man's land, has come to an end. But it is still just two teams chasing, Intermarché and Lotto Soudal. Now, looking a bit further down the field, we talked about Arkea. They've got some options, haven't they? They've got Hugo Hofstetter, who's had a great year. Amaury Capio as well has had wins. Connor Swift, you mentioned too, coming into the final phase of his career with Team Arkea Zanzic. A good signing, I think, for the Ineos Grenadiers, especially when you look to the classics as well. Connor's such an all-rounder, isn't he? I think he's a rider that, when given freedom, can win bike races, but as a utility rider as well, I think he'll fit in very well at Ineos.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's one of those riders who's just got such a massive engine. I think you put him in any sort of situation and he can ride. He can do big watts and be super useful. But then at the same time, you put him into a classics scenario or a one-day race scenario, and he really kind of comes into his own and is able to win and get big results. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see how he develops at Ineos and potentially goes on and gets some big wins in the classic seasons to come. Because I think personally, it's a rider that can win, Tour of Flanders style races.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we've seen the best of Connor Swift yet. He's still only 26 years of age, and each year has just got slowly better and better. His incremental rise through the ranks has been impressive, but each year we've seen gains. An exceptionally likeable fellow too. He's one of the team leaders at Arkea Zanzic, and has had a great couple of years with that squad. But it's a big opportunity for the man from Yorkshire, and we certainly do wish him all the very best. Another team I'm looking at Alpecin de Koenig, again, the team that just keeps winning and winning. But interesting, isn't it, Tim Merlier? They've got Sylvain Dillier, Krieger, Dries de Pont, Gianni Vermeersch amongst their top riders. So they're a team with so many options, even if you strip out Mathieu van der Poel, although, again, that's become a bit of a trope now. They are such a strong team. Now, Tim Merlier has had 4 wins. He's the Belgian champion, but he's had a real dry spell. The last win, in fact, for Merlier was the Belgian Road Race Championship. So, and he did look quite stern at the start there. You wonder, and he's moving on to Quick Step next year, isn't he? You wonder if that sustained dry spell, which we haven't seen from him over the last few years, might be just playing on his mind a little bit. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it might be, because he did have a period there where he just seemed to be winning everything he lined up at, and he was so consistent. So I imagine when that doesn't quite happen in the same way, when you're not turning up at races and things are just clicking, it must be a bit bewildering. It must be quite tough to deal with. I can't quite relate to that because I never had such a consistent spell of wins myself.
Nor did I.
But I imagine for a sprinter of that calibre, it must be really hard to kind of get back on top of things, or even figure out what's going wrong if you're still doing the same training, you're eating the same things, and it's not quite working out in the same way, and you have to kind of mix things up and find a new strategy. But a race like this, these races at the end of the season, even if you've got a contract and you're moving on to another squad and you've got a big contract in your pocket, you still want to finish the season strong, and you want to line yourself up for the following year with good morale and go into the winter in good spirits, so that you can kind of kick on the following year. So a rider like Tim Mallier, he'll be really aggressive looking for a result today. But he's got a strong team with him, as you say. Dries de Bont, I think, is another rider who could fare really well. The sort of guy who really likes to take his chances, and I think this is a sort of race today which will definitely see some chances present themselves. So watch out for Dries de Bont.
Yeah, Dries de Bont, definitely an option. The former Belgian champion, of course. Took a great stage win in the Giro d'Italia this year. We're looking at one of the leaders of the Team Arkea, Samsic, should I say, Amaury Capio, deciding, despite the weather conditions, we're heading into the serious part of the race. Things are starting to hot up, and he's taken off his rain cape. So 2 minutes and 24 for our 4 riders out in front. 53 Ks to go. So 53 kilometres to go. And there is a point in the race, again, using our own experience in racing, even though it's cold and wet, unless it's really, really freezing cold. I hated racing in a gilet or in a rain cape. But it's a psych as well as physiological. Obviously, take it off and immediately you're going to feel a little bit colder. But it's almost a sign that now the racing has turned into a final phase where I never even liked racing in overshoes. I didn't like any of that additional stuff. But when I could, I would take it off. But it's almost a signal, isn't it? Right, okay, we're going to start racing now. Time to get the cape off, because it's going to be very difficult actually when the hammer starts to go down to strip off and take clothes off and know where to put them, etc. Especially in these when your hands are numb, etc.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than getting caught in a rain cape when the race really hits the fan. It's just horrible, it's a horrible feeling. It's like having a big bin bag round you, just fighting into the winds, and you're looking to get every little game possible, but you can't get your rain jacket off either, because when the pace is really on, it is so technical. On a course like this too, and you just can't get it off, and you're stuck with it. So you do have to make a bit of a decision. It's a bit of a gamble when to take it off, because if you take it off too early and the pace doesn't hot up, you get cold, and then you're in a bit of a tricky situation as well. But I was like you, I used to hate wearing them, hated rain capes. I remember having a bit of a tantrum in the Vuelta when I had one on. The weather was absolutely miserable. I had a bit of a tantrum. I kind of yanked it off when I found a moment, put it in my back pocket. And I actually found myself in the breakaway after that day. I think I got a bit angry and went into slight Hulk mode. Slightly rare for me.
Brilliant stuff. I like the idea of a Conor Dunn Hulk, to be perfectly honest with you. Fueled by adrenaline after being wound up by his rain cape and catapulting himself into a breakaway. Oh, that's a wonderful little story that just played out in my mind. Anyway, back to the peloton. From Conor Dunn, Incredible Hulks, to incredible work being done on the front now by Lotto Soudal. They've really started to increase the pace here. The gap is starting to come down significantly. Just over 51 kilometres to go, as you can see. And the gap now to our 4 riders. We did have 6 riders out in front, but Matthew Teggett and also Michael Zilliard have been dropped and have now gone through the peloton, and as far as we're aware, straight out the other side as well. And we've got about 3 kilometres till we hit the finish once more. Then we'll see 2 laps to go. That is La Vielle-Sens. Whatever that is, I'm not too sure. It's clearly a building of some significance here, just on the outskirts of Marche and Famenne. Oh yeah, that's pretty beautiful, isn't it? That is clearly quite an old building. Real deep history in this particular area. It's such an interesting place, and I do urge you, if you're ever in Belgium, you've got Flanders, of course, famous for its cycling, but the area of Wallonia is absolutely beautiful, has its own unique identity too. So I think I can remember, I was looking at that face of that rider on the front. Looks like the figure of Taco van der Hoorn. Straight away, I didn't recognise him with his full leg warmers on and full gloves, but that's pretty unmistakable, isn't it? He's so aero, isn't he, with those slightly narrower bars, hoods turned in, which has become quite popular these days. But Taco van der Hoorn is a great rider. I really enjoy his tenacious, aggressive style.
Yeah, he's always got this kind of grimace which looks like he's smiling, which must be so infuriating to anyone he's riding next to, because he's a serious watt monster. He manages to put out the power, and he's powering the peloton along here. in great fashion. As you say, he gets so aero. I do not understand how he rides in such an aero position, but it works so well for him. Some cracking results over the years and some really impressive performances too. Doing a great job here for Intermarché, getting on the front and keeping things controlled. So I imagine for a moment there, when we saw the attack from Kenneth Van Rooij, there's a few nervous riders potentially in the peloton and in the team cars, thinking that things were about to kick off a bit early. So Lotto Soudal and Intermarché have done well to kind of get back on the front and keep this race under control and keep the riders in tabs behind. And you can see them all queuing up behind too. It's looking like everyone's kind of getting a bit nervous about positioning coming into the finishing zone again.
Yeah, they've definitely picked up the pace here. Quite a distinct injection. You can just see just the body language of the runners in the front. There's also, we can see the white of AG2R Citroën just moving up the outside as well. They would have been acutely aware that a rider came down. Just see Tim Merlier. Even his cape is in the tricolour, the black, yellow and red of Belgian national road race champion. Very distinct, easily identifiable from the air. But yeah, just a little bit of positioning play here. Quite a wide road, but as you can see, well, that looks like the American now starting to struggle. Gage Hecht, 24 years of age, just cannot keep up with the pace here. There's been no rapid acceleration from the group. It's just that at some point, and it looked to be grimacing a little bit earlier on, didn't they? Looked to be suffering just a bit, but it's just that slow, incremental ebbing away of energy. There comes a point where you just cannot hold on any longer. As we see the peloton split into two distinct halves, navigating this road furniture as they head onto the outskirts, and the gap coming down are quite a bit. I mean, primarily due to the momentum of the peloton for this positioning.
Yeah, it's obviously a key point in the race for the peloton. Every lap we've seen them really position themselves at the front here, making sure they can get their riders who they're hoping to get to the front and take the win right up there into these final few kilometres of the circuit. It's an interesting one. You don't often see a breakaway deplete so quickly in a race. No. That's three riders now who've been dropped in the space of a lap, actually. So I think someone is really driving the pace on, and someone is on a good day. I'm not quite sure who it is. From the TV pictures, I'm guessing it's Vinebo from Rual Cycling Team.
It looks like it, yeah.
The Danish rider. He just seems to be churning a big gear and looking quite comfortable. Obviously on a good day, and he's trying to keep the pace going and see if he can stay away to the end. And fair play to him. Great to see such a ride taking place. But if you are a rider like Hecht and you find yourself with a Vinebo on a day like this, it can be tough going.
Yeah, Gage Hecht, born in New Orleans, won a stage a few years back at the Colorado Classic. Certainly got reasonable legs to have got in that breakaway, but cannot hold on much longer. And as you say, it is quite unusual. You often see one rider getting dropped or the brake splitting because of attacks, but I think just because of these weather conditions and the difficult nature of the terrain today, riders are, rather than just exploding, they're just fading away. They're not suddenly a lot worse than they were. It's just that the energy is slowly but surely just being reduced, and there comes a point where you just cannot hold any longer. It's a very graduated thing. It's not extreme at all, is it? It's very difficult to actually try and get that across, that these weather conditions means that you fade away in a completely different way than you would elsewhere. I think it's quite unique.
Yeah, it can be quite a brutal experience to deal with as well, because you almost wonder why you're getting dropped. It's almost more of a mental thing, because your body just slowly gets to that point and you just can't hang on. You just can't deal with it anymore, and it is just the cold getting into. It's tough going, and it is on when you hit these little ramps. You just have that little bit more of an acceleration of pace that you notice it. And suddenly there's nothing you can do about it. You find yourself going backwards, and if you are with a rider who's on a really good day and who is starting to up the pace, inside 50k to go now, so now is the time, if you want to try and stay away in the breakaway, to really up things. If you're struggling and you feel that, yeah, it's a hard one.
It certainly is. Well, there we go, 47k's to go, 2 more laps here at the Famenne Ardenne Classic, and the peloton still being led by Lotto Soudal. Just sat in the wheel there, Taco van der Hoorn, Victor Kampenaerts there, the Legan at the head of affairs there as well, in 4th wheel. Just saw Connor Swift. A little bit harder to identify the riders when they're completely covered like this. But certainly a few riders just suffering towards the back. But still 2 minutes and 2 seconds for the riders that remain out in front. And there they are. we've got Tim Marsman of the Metec Solar Watt team. He's the rider on the front at the moment in that black kit. The rider who's riding very impressively in second wheel at the moment is the British rider Mark Stewart from the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro Cycling team. And also in the mix, I think Connor's correctly identified as perhaps being the strongest at the moment, doing some really long, effective, strong pulls on the front, is Emil Nelke Winbo, 28 years of age, from the Rio cycling team. There he is in the orange jersey. And a team that have struggled over the last couple of years. They were Pro Conti a couple of years back, but really struggled for funding. But I tell you what, when they do any bike race that I've commentated that Ruel have been a part of, they've really got stuck in. Super aggressive team, and with riders that can perform across the board. And Vingbo is a classy rider. Previously 6th overall in the Tour of Denmark back in 2018, 3rd in Tro-Bro Leon a couple of years back as well. So he is a classy rider, and certainly making the difference, because despite the efforts of the bunch behind, although they won't certainly be panicking now, Connor, will they? 202 is eminently closable by the peloton behind. We've only got 2 teams riding, but I think this is a very, very strong performance by our break today.
Yeah, I think this trio of riders are feeling good, and they're just looking to push on now and enjoy the remainder of this race. I don't think the peloton will be panicking too much. 46 kilometres, it's quite a long way to go, especially in these conditions, and with a few more ascents of the main climb on this circuit to come. But still, they won't want to let it, stay out there too much longer. I'd like to see that gap coming down rather than going up. It'll be interesting to see how the likes of Inivo cope with the next few ascents, because they have been riding strongly, and if they do still have the legs to push on, then it could start to get into dangerous territory. But I think for the moment, peloton will be happy with the situation.
Yeah, especially with only being 3 riders out in front. So it looks like we've got Alpecin at Phoenix have now joined the chase. It's the first time they've actually joined in. I imagine they do want to start bringing this gap down now as well, but I don't think they'll be super minded about the break. It's just about keeping this momentum on and making this race as hard as possible. And just look at the body language of these riders here. Campanart's excluded, who's solid as a rock, but everybody else swaying from side to side. But Campanart's completely locked and loaded in that familiar position of his. So that's Cage Hecht. Looks like he's one of the riders, should I say, of the American Human Powered Health Team. It might have actually been Hecht who's been caught and passed. So this is the same as we saw on the previous laps. As soon as the road goes up any of these significant climbs, riders are being detached in all sorts of difficulties. But the pace really being turned on at the front now by Alpecin de Koning. Remember, they have Dries de Bont, Tim Merlier, Sylvain Dillier, and Janine Mirsch as well. He is a classy rider. They will, I would imagine, would be the protected riders, and they're certainly making it difficult at the front now. So things slowly but surely starting to hot up now, Connor.
I think it was actually Dries de Bont as well who put that little acceleration in for Alpecin de Koning. You can just see him there in 7th wheel. Kind of got the Belgium champion bands on the biceps there. Makes him slightly more distinguishable, but serious rider who can challenge today. Interesting to see him being put to work so early. Potentially it was a slight acceleration or potentially an attack by him there, just to see if any riders were keen on mixing things up at this stage of the race. But yeah, you can see the pressure that's caused at the back there. Plenty of riders going into difficulties from that small acceleration. September Mark.
September Mark looking good there in the white and blue with the Israel Premier Tech team. Now, is this an attack of... Now, this looks like... trying to think of Taco van der Hoorn. So, no, it did some big pulls on the front, but Taco van der Hoorn, being Taco van der Hoorn, certainly won't raise the white flag just yet. If there's anything he can do, he will try and get back in contact, dragging yourself back. But I tell you what, once you've done some turns on the front and you've been pulling for quite a while, you hit a climb, it's very, very difficult to make that a little bit of adjustment, isn't it? It really does take its toll. But if there's any chance of doing just a little bit more for the team, he will, because he is, as we said before, an exceptionally tenacious rider who can go very, very deep indeed. I don't know if you watched it this year. I was with the pleasure of commentating on the Brussels Cycling Classic back in June, where he took that win from the breakaway. But that final last kilometre was one of the best last kilometres I've seen in a bike race for a very, very long time. But he is one of those riders that can go quite deep. It was literally a grovel up the finishing straight. If you've got a chance to re-watch it, Connor, I would if I were you.
Yeah, I remember finding myself in the breakaway with him on occasion, and he just used to churn this gear and be so still on the bike, and he just loved, I think, being out front and kind of putting the challenge to the peloton, see if he could stay away, because you do always find him in those breakaway situations, and it's worked quite well for him as well. He's been picking up some nice results from that sort of scenario. He's done a good job today. I think his day might be done now. There are potential places to get back in there and get back to the front. Lotte Soudal, though, with strength in numbers at the front here, really taking this race and controlling it.
Yeah, they certainly are, as you said. First 6 riders. One of the riders has been dropped. That was Sebastian Grignard, but he did a lot of the work earlier on, so not surprising that the 23-year-old has now been left. But Arnaud Delis, Victor Campenard, Cedric Bullens, Jesper de Buys has been doing a lot of work recently. Florian Vermeersch and Brent Wijnmoor are the riders occupying the first 6 places in the peloton. And since we've come on air now, this is the lowest the gap has been at 1 minute and 33 seconds for our break. It was once 6 riders strong, and it has now been reduced to just 6. And you're looking at the figure of Mark Stewart on the front. Rider we haven't had the opportunity to talk too much about, but has had a very good year. Won the overall in the New Zealand Cycling Classic as well as a stage. And then he took 3rd overall in the Tour of Hellas, the Tour of Greece. Actually, I was 3rd overall in the Tour of Greece back in 1998. One of my only podiums in a big race like that. And then recently won in Romania the Tour of Romania. So he's had a very, very good year so far. So a conversation. Can't exactly discern. Can't lip read from that distance, I'm afraid. Just giving him a little bit of encouragement there by the sounds of things, telling him what the gap is, and just telling him that he's looking good, because he's clearly looking pretty strong here, and clearly looking at that stage win in the New Zealand Cycle Classic that he had. That was earlier in the year, very early in the year. Put away the likes of George Bennett on a very, very hilly stage, so he's very capable on these climbs, and it's looking still very strong.
Yeah, definitely. Just as they start the lower slopes of the Côte d'Ivoire. I think he's a rider who he's done some classy rides, and he's intelligent too. So if he has managed to save that bit of energy in the breakaway and can use it up in these last 40 kilometres, it'd be great to see him, be prominent in the attack and in the closing stages. I believe he found himself in New Zealand in 2019 when the COVID lockdown hit.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he found himself kind of stuck out in New Zealand as all the travel restrictions came into effect, and I was reading it gave him a bit of a time to, fall back in love with cycling in a way. He lost touch with the British cycling programme. I think he was on their kind of under 23 development team, and then he stuck out in New Zealand. He kind of found this new love of cycling. He's kind of gone from strength to strength since then. He's now on Bolton Equities Black Spoke, and he's been riding really strongly this year. So fair play to him.
Yeah, with his results, you'd imagine that there might be a couple of pro teams actually looking at him, but I'm not too sure what his options are for next year. No information about the team that is going to be riding for next year, but certainly put himself in the shop window and continuing to do so with rides like this. As the peloton just take this little right-hander at the bottom of the climb, there's that little sign denoting it is the start of the King of the Mountains. And this ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire will be the last time that points are awarded at the top, although I don't think that is at the top of these riders' minds. It's just trying to stay away for as long as they can. Stewart just on the back there, looking good. Marsman is the rider on your screen right now, the Dutchman, and then Bingo just on the front there from Denmark, 28 years of age, of the Rual cycling team. And that peloton is a little bit smaller now. We had 129 starters today, a few hours ago now, in Famenne, Marche en Famenne, should I say. But I do think this peloton, especially over these last couple of laps, as things start to warm up a little bit more, will start to fracture a little bit. Difficult to call this one, whether we're going to see a big group sprint or whether we're going to see a small group go away, or even a solo rider. Certainly difficult to tell. And we've got a nice mix of riders. I mean, when you look at the parkour, the weather conditions, Connor, and the composition of the teams here and the sorts of riders within those teams, we could actually have, it wouldn't surprise me that we had any one of those scenarios. It's certainly not a nailed-on sprint or a break day. It's a difficult one to call, isn't it?
It is a difficult one to call. I think it all comes down to Lotto Soudal and how well they control this race, how well they manage to spare their riders now.
So the peloton for the fourth time today, climbing the Côte, sorry, the third time today, climbing the Côte du Roi. One more ascent of this climb, and we've got an attack. The rider just, as we pan back to our breakaway, the remnants of our breakaway, only 3 riders strong now. There was a little counter-attack that came just from the front of the peloton. The gap now 1 minute and 37 seconds. A long old drag, this one, just under 5% gradient, but 2.3 kilometres long. There's still Mark Stewart doing his job on the front. Sits quite low forward on the saddle, but looks very effective. It is I do remember reading that story, actually. I completely forgotten, but a quite remarkable story. But a very talented bike rider indeed. And they've got some options back in the bunch as well. I mean, they've got Stewart in the break, but we've got Aaron Gate, we believe is still back in the peloton, and James Oram as well. So they've got a really decent team, haven't they? And what a season Aaron Gate has had. Commonwealth Games champion, but has won across the board on the track. He's a track champion too, and then has won quite a lot of races on the continent, so he's a real talent.
Yeah, definitely. He's an old teammate of mine, actually, on various occasions. So yeah, it's great to see him really far in this year and getting some brilliant results. Cracking winning the Commonwealth Games to win that one. It was cool to see, and then he just seemed to be on fire for the rest of the Commonwealth Games, actually, just winning everything he started. So tough rider too, so tough. I think today he'll be enjoying it. I think if he can look after himself in the bunch and be there in whatever sort of group gets to the finish, he'll be a serious contender in the sprint. It'll be interesting to pan back to the peloton now and see how those attacks are playing out, because I thought it was a rider from Israel Premier Tech potentially starting this acceleration. So we see Intermarché go on the attack, countering that move. Yep,
another rider from Trek Segafredo. They've got Ed Turns, Jacob Elcombe, Tony Gallopin, Danul, Tom Scoins, Otto Vergada and Alex Kirsch from Luxembourg. That's their lineup. And interestingly, just moving up the outside, the first we've seen of the Total Energies team. They've only got a small team of 5 riders here. Valentin Ferrand had a great win earlier this year. Daniel Oss, the faithful lieutenant, a good classics rider, of course, Daniel Oss, and a faithful lieutenant and good friend of Peter Sagan. Then we've got Nicky Terpstra riding one of his last races as a professional, Dries van Gestel and Anthony Tergis. Actually, that's a pretty decent team. Ferrand, Oss, Terpstra, van Gestel, Tergis. That's a strong squad for the French team. They've had a solid year this year. Peter Sagan, good ride in the World Championships for him, but it's had so many problems with injuries and been catching COVID on a couple of occasions. He's never quite delivered, although he took that win in the Tour of Switzerland. But they've got a pretty decent team here, and they've at least 3 riders moving forward towards the front.
Yeah, I think this is the moment where we're starting to see Lotto Soudal struggling to keep control on the bunch. As these attacks go and some of their riders start to get distanced, we could see much more unpredictable racing. And we've talked about how strongly the brakes can ride, and they're inside 40k to go now. And if you do see those attacks go and the control go out of the peloton and the chase behind, that's when the chances of the breakaway staying away really begins to improve. I think you see that kind of disarray behind. No one quite knows whether to work or not. And I think that's what those riders at the front have to do now. They have to keep their heads down, keep on riding hard, and hope that potentially happens behind. So it'll give them a really good chance of staying away. I also noticed Rory Townsend there with Sun God. He was really attentive with a few of those attacks, riding right up there in 4th, 5th wheel, I believe. Dropped back a bit now potentially, but he's doing a great ride so far, and he could be one to watch as well if this comes down to a sprint. But it looks like Israel Premier Tech are starting to kind of fire those attacks off the front and try and mix things up a bit here in this race.
Yep, there's a couple of big accelerations. A couple of riders went clear, but they were very quickly brought back, as you see the long strung out line just coming over the top now. We're well over the top of the Côte du Roi. It is a long downhill section with a couple of little flatter plateaus, and then the road kicks up again. But we have at least around a 4 or 5k drop off the top of this climb. It's one of the only opportunities to get any real recovery. Although, as you can see, as the gradient isn't particularly steep, you actually need to keep pedaling on the descent. It's not a descent that you plummet down. It's a gradual gradient, and you'll need to keep pressing on. But there's another launch on the front, or another rider on the front. I think it is the figure of Dries de Bont yet again. As you said, that style of his, and those little stripes on his biceps, as you said. But he's one of those riders, isn't he, Dries de Bont, who is very rarely put to given him a race like this, given the options they've got. You'd imagine he'd have his own free rein, but even when he gets in breaks or there's stuff, he's always happy to be aggressive, isn't he? He's a difficult rider to read. He might be just riding on the front just to make it hard, and that still be minded to try and go for the win. He's quite an interesting proposition, isn't it?
He is, yeah. I found myself in the breakaway with him a few times, actually, on occasion when I was living in Belgium, and we'd be in like Pro Comesses, which was kind of smaller, lesser known races, but still really prestigious. And you do quite a lot of them throughout the season. He just used to like riding hard. He'd get in the break no matter what, and just if you were on the front with him, he'd be like, right, let's go, let's smash it. He just used to love that. And even on the races like you see today, and bigger races in pro cycling, it would be the same story really. He just loved getting in the break or even attacking and mixing things up. He's not the sort of rider that enjoyed kind of sitting back and playing a patient game. I kind of empathise with that a bit. I used to be the same in a way. It's quite like going on the attack if I could, which was quite rare. But like you see today, he's being quite aggressive and looking to spice things up. And I always thought he was quite a good barometer of a race, because when you start to see him looking to place those moves, you knew it was a good moment to try and be there at the front yourself, and things were about to start getting a bit more serious.
No, definitely. He had a win just recently in one of the national Belgian races in the Textile Prix Egypt. Took that on the 20th. And then again, Memorial Fred ruined the 5th place. But his biggest win of the year, that's one of the biggest wins of his whole career so to the Belgian Road Championships, was stage 18 in the Giro d'Italia. And you talk about Dries de Bont as being an aggressive rider, an exciting rider, a rider that's slightly unpredictable, but that said, he is very, very intelligent as well. That stage in the Giro that he won, I mean, you've got to take your hat off to the whole break on that particular day. Affini, Magnus Cort and David de Bordeaux. That was an absolute masterclass in not just strength, but in the way they tactically rode that stage. And Dries de Bont was at the centre of that. His post-race interview following the stage was remarkable. It really gave great insight into the intelligence needed. When you have a finite amount of resource, he's one of those riders that really understands the best way to deploy it. If you could find that interview online, I urge you, if you're a fan of the tactical side of our wonderful sport, have a look, because one of the best rides I've seen all year in relation to getting it right tactically.
Really remarkable, isn't it? I mean, when you're going full pelt and you're trying to put your body to such a tough place, but at the same time use your brain to almost play a game of poker and to play your cards when they're needed most. A lot of admiration for riders like Dries, because he's done it time and time again, actually, and despite having really good legs, he's also been really intelligent to put himself in those situations in the first place and read a race so well. That's why I've got quite a lot of respect for him. And if you're seeing him attack now, it's a sure sign that things are about to get pretty spicy.
Indeed. And it's not too far away from the front, but we do have another rider from Total Energies adding a bit of pace to the front of this group. And watch out for Valentin Ferrand. I think he's one of the riders. I think this is the rider just looking around at the young Frenchman, 24 years of age. Took a stage of the Dauphiné this year, stage 6 into Gap. A lot of glancing around now. Now this is where we talked about this. This is where the breakaway could profit, but also those saying that there's no one team dominating or controlling things now. It's just natural racing momentum. And the gap for our 3 riders out in front with 33 Ks to go and a bit more, just 59 seconds. So we've got around 8 kilometres until we pass through the finish line and take the bell. That will mean one more ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. The gap now for our three riders out in front is only 58 seconds. And a reminder of who those riders are. Tim Marsman of the Midtech team, number 164 there in the black kit is there for the Netherlands. Ruwal cycling team are represented by Emil Milke Winbo in the orange kit. And also in the mix, Mark Stewart of the Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro cycling team in the yellow and blue. Meanwhile, the bunch moving along very quickly now as we head ever nearer to Marche en Famenne. Still reasonable size here, but Lotto Soudal have done everything today. They've really controlled this. And there's a few little splits starting to happen there. Now, just stepping back briefly, we talked a lot about this relegation situation and the attitude of teams. Now, although Lotto they're about 1,000 points adrift, looking like they're going to be relegated, and there's been criticism of the system about the way it's changing the way that teams ride. But I actually think over the last few months, although they might have not amassed a lot of points, the way that Lotto Soudal have gone into the races and taken hold of them and tried stuff, I think it's been really impressive. I really do. Okay, it looks like they're going to fall foul and drop down, but I really admire the way they've actually ridden the last portion of the season. They have really got stuck in and ridden with a lot of pride, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the way that they've taken on these races, these one-day races in Belgium and Northern France, they've really almost dominated them this season in a way. Arnaud Delis especially, he's been following that up with some fantastic wins himself, proving quite unbeatable when it's come down to a sprint. But like you see today, I mean, the attack's been flying. We've got 32 kilometres to go now, and it looked like the peloton was on a bit of a tough moment there, a bit of disarray, and they've managed to get all their riders back to the front. They've got themselves together again. They're keeping things under control, which is really tough to do in the conditions the way they are as well, especially. So yeah, really admirable racing by Lotto Soudal. And I guess it must be quite tough for a team with this ongoing relegation battle, and we don't know what the final results of that will be until everything's said and done. But if you're on a team which, you know, potentially knows that it's going to be demoted for morale, it must be really hard to kind of pick yourself back up and still race with that sort of aggression, which they are doing today. So yeah, fair play to them.
Yep. They certainly are riding in a determined fashion. And there is the aforementioned Dries de Bon, happy to do the pacemaking on the front. And the way that he's positioned there, and the fact that he's clearly going to be doing some turns on the front, suggests to me, although you never know with de Bon, he probably end up in a breakaway now. It just suggests to me that they want to try and keep this together for Tim Merlier, because although the climb is hard, it's not super steep, and there's no super steep climbs. I mean, we know the Ardenne has got plenty of short steep climbs, but although this circuit is up and down and undulating, there's nothing ferociously steep. Even the longest climb on the circuit is actually, it's pretty gradual, so it might actually suit some of the punchier riders. So it does look as if they are trying to keep this together for the likes of Arnaud Delis and indeed Tim Merlier, and the same can be said for Intermarché, looking after Benjamin Gamay.
I think everyone will be nervous of that final ascent to the Côte d'Ivoire. I think that's where we've seen people get put under pressure. It's quite a small group now in the peloton. There's a lot of riders gone out the back, so it will be slightly easier to position yourself when you find yourself in a group of 40, 50 riders. It's a lot easier to be where you need to be at the front than if you're in a group of 100, 120. So naturally, your job does get a little bit easier if you've survived until this point. But at the same time, you know, your teammates have been doing a good job for a while now, and if they're starting to get tired, you're really going to have to rely on them to bring some of these attacks back, which I think we'll see in this final lap. So for the likes of Tim Merlier and Arnaud Delis, they're going to have to be a little bit aggressive themselves and try and be in the right position too, and not let themselves slip too far back on these remaining climbs.
Yep, that's a really, really good point. Still, though, it is Lotto Soudal on the front. Alpecin de Koning just behind, represented by Dries de Bon. Just see on the left-hand side, a couple of riders in that white kit was grey because of these weather conditions. Trek Segafredo. And they've got a couple of good options, say perhaps Ed Turns. It comes down to a sprint, and the gap coming down now dramatically. Only 32 seconds for our three riders out in front. Clearly in plain sight of the peloton on this long, straight section of road. So reduced peloton, but still a sizable number there. as we head up this long drag. In fact, it's not the aforementioned Christobon on the front. It's a teammate of his. I think it looks like Alexander Krieger actually on the front now. Victor Campenaerts about 10th place, a little bit further back. Another couple of teams that might want to be disruptive on this final climb. We're looking at AG2R Citroën, although the likes of like Oliver Narsson and Greg Van Avermaet can sprint, they're not going to want to take the likes of Merlier and Gromai to the finish. And the way they've been floating around, as well as the couple of riders from Total Energies, I think we might see a move from maybe Van Avermaet on the long climb to try and get a little group. As we see the break shell one other rider. Fair play though to Tim Marsman. Two riders now out in front as the gap continues to come down now under the pressure of Alpecin de Koning. Good riding here. This is getting really hard, and then they were two. With quite evenly spread, Colin. We've seen the break lose a rider on this same stretch every single time.
It's been quite remarkable, really. It's like a battle of the strongest between Mark Stewart and Vinnevo. So we'll see who will be the last rider remaining, or potentially they'll share that accolade. But this long drag up to the finish, it must be tough in the peloton here. It's just such a straight road, and we've seen a rider be shelled from the breakaway each ascent up it now. So it's obviously a really tough section of the race. He dropped back down into town after this section into the finish. So obviously a really key point positioning wise. As we come back to the breakaway here, Mark Stewart, he's really pushing on, gap holding at 30 seconds. I think it's going to be hard for him to maintain that to the finish at this stage. But doing a really admirable job keeping the pace high, and cracking ride by these two riders.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's been no attacks in this front group. It's just been constant pressure. We've never seen the riders gradually drop away, the first of which was Teggett. And then we saw Zillard go. Then it was Cage Hecht, the American from Human Powered Health, and then Tim Marsman. And now we just have Mark Stewart and Vinbo off the front. He's just about to be called there. One final glance over the shoulder and he will see the peloton moving very quickly now. 27 seconds now with 28.5 kilometres still to go. We've got around 4 kilometres, 3.5 Ks until we hit the finish line, and then we will get the bell. Riders just moving up the outside there in the white as a representative from the with Sungod team as well. They've got a very similar kit actually to the Minerva cycling team. Very, very similar kits, both of those squads. So 28 seconds and holding steady. That long drag there, although we've not seen anybody attack on it, by the fact that the riders from the break have been dropped on this, suggests that deeper into this race, if we don't see any splits on the climb of the Côte d'Ivoire, it's definitely a place where there's options to try and go clear on, or at least try and attack before the finish.
For sure, yeah, because after that drag you come back down into town where it's obviously really technical. You see those real narrow city streets coming towards the finish, and if you can get a good gap there and potentially escape through the town, then you've got quite a good advantage. That finishing drag, it is quite long as well. It's quite you're going to be hanging out front for a while, but if you have got the legs, it's a perfect place to try and launch an attack, I think.
Yep, I do think you're right. The only thing that's not in favour of a rider wanting to attack is the fact this particular section is dead straight. A lot of pressure being applied at the front now by Vinbo, just putting Mark Stewart in a little bit of difficulty. Just tell by the way that he'd slid forward on the saddle, his arms have gone out a little bit. You see riders, when they're right on the ragged edge, you start to almost like crouch on the bike as you try and recruit different muscle groups to try and get back on the wheel. But Stewart has done so just as they crest the top of that long drag and the road starts to drop. And for a brief couple of moments, they can afford a little bit of rest. So if you're just joining us, this is the Famenne Ardenne Classic, the 4th edition of this young race held in the Wallonia area of Belgium. We're actually in and out of Wallonia, but the start and finish is in the Luxembourg province. We've got 2 riders out in front. There was a break of 6 that dominated the day, and now we have just 2, and they have a very slender lead of just 21 seconds, as you can see. And the rider on the front is Mark Stewart of the United Kingdom, riding for the New Zealand squad, Bolton Equities Black Spoke Pro Cycling Team. And with him for company, riding for the Riwal cycling team, is Emil Vinbo of Denmark. But closing in very, very quickly is the peloton, being led by Lotto Soudal, who've done the vast majority of the pacemaking today. But next time through, they'll get one lap, and that means one more climb of the Côte d'Ivoire. Will it stay all together, or will there be a breakaway? Difficult to tell right now, but they're about to be caught. They might actually be caught on this finishing straight coming in to the line now. Only 14 seconds now, Colin.
Yeah, every lap we've seen the pinch point through town here, where riders really try and get themselves to the front and position themselves for this kind of finish and straight. I think it's the climb just after the finish line, which is proving quite tricky for the peloton.
Yeah.
So everyone's trying to line themselves up, give themselves potentially some slipping room for this climb. We saw Dries de Bont for Alpecin de Koning put in a little acceleration on the previous lap. So I imagine we might see the same from another rider or the man himself. Vinabo here pushes on through town. He really is on a cracking day. He's barely showed any sign of weakness. He's just been in the drops, looking proper solid. Get a good sight here of the final kilometre. It is pretty narrow, isn't it, Matt? As you come through town, you have the street bollards on either side, so you have to be really attentive if you're fighting for the win here next time around.
Yeah, definitely. The finishing straight opens up, as you can see here. We've had a couple of riders come to grief on that little bend, but both our two leading riders negotiated that one safely. And you can see the finish line up ahead, around 700 metres away. But as you said, Connor, that bit through town, it narrows considerably. Lots of different road surfaces, changed from tarmac to cobblestones to small paving flags. So quite technical, and then it opens out again. So only 6 seconds. So the peloton have rounded that corner. Riders jettison bottles, lightening the load as we head into the final lap of this finishing circuit here. So good work being done by Alpecin de Koning, not only bringing the brake back, but making it hard for the remaining riders in this peloton. A real attritional race today, difficult weather conditions, undulating terrain, and what a great shot there. Vinabo takes a little look around. He knows his time is done. Not too sure which rider's going to win the King of the Mountains. We haven't really been totting up the points, but one of these riders would definitely have taken that award. But their tenure at the front, they've been at the front for the vast majority of proceedings today, is about to be done and dusted. But I do doff my cap to both of the riders out in front, though, Vinabo and Mark Stewart and the rest of the break. They're narrowly in front with a lap to go, but the lead about to be snuffed out. One lap to go.
Looking like it's going to be a tough last lap as well. This breakaway coming back relatively early, you know, with 23-24k still to race. So there'll be plenty of riders now thinking that this could be their day, and he's put in a few early attacks. It's going to be tough work for Alpecin de Koning and also Lotto Soudal to control this one. It looks like they are riding for their sprinters Arnaud de Lee and Tim Merlier. Tim Merlier perhaps on a good day getting his riders to the fore here as they pass through the feed zone for the final time. But yeah, it's going to be a tough final lap to control, Matt, I think.
It is indeed. Well, it's that little steep climb that you were talking about. Vinbo just continues to ride. Stewart about to be retaken by the bunch. 2 more metres until the Dane suffers the same fate. But yeah, this little bit of a climb just through the finish is arguably the steepest, isn't it, from what we can see here. There are 3 significant climbs on the circuit before the Côte d'Ivoire. This small one, then there's another one after this, then it drops down again, then we take in the Côte d'Ivoire, and then we have that long descent down, that really fast section for the kick-up, and then the drop down, and then the kick-up to the line again. But for the first time since we have been on air, the peloton is as one. Nobody out in front, and the race essentially opened up again now. So it's down to Lotto Soudal and to Alpecin de Koning to try and control this. And interestingly though now, Intermarché Wanty-Gobert, doing the pacemaking before, have dropped back and are quite happy to leave it to the team in blue and red now.
Yeah, I think they'd be quite confident of being Gramai, getting over that final climb on the Côte d'Ivoire. I think he won't be put into any difficulty there.
So I don't think they would have a reason particularly to get on the front here and control things. I think it's in their interest to let Lotto Soudal, use some riders up, controlling this one. It's going to be a tough ask because if the attacks do fly, they've already used up a number of riders already to try and keep this one together and to hit the steeper section of this climb. If any of those riders do get put into difficulty and are lost, then it's going to be quite a tough one for Arnaud Delis to remain in contention if we do see some serious attacks on the Côte d'Ivoire. Dries de Bont, though, looking comfortable. He hasn't quite been riding on the front here. He's almost just been positioning himself in the top 10 riders, keeping himself out of trouble as we go back to the back of the peloton. And Mark Stewart, I think he'll ride in this last lap. Solid ride on the legs there, and brilliant ride in that breakaway up there with Vinabo to the end. Cracking ride by himself. Lotto Soudal, they still do have the numbers. Around 6 riders there at the front, including Delis, so they do have the strength to continue riding this last lap. Rory Townsend also present. He's been doing a good job by himself just to keep himself out of trouble and follow any potential moves. We see a bit of an acceleration go on the left there, Matt.
Yep, looks like it is a rider from one of the continental teams that's gone clear. I think it's the Volker Vessel cycling team here. They've gone. That's a rider from Trek Segafredo. Coming over. It looks like it's Elko trying to get across the gap. Immediately marked by a rider from Alpecin at De Koning as well. So the attacking starting to kick off on this series of climbs that lead us into the main climb of this finishing circuit. The climb that they got up the most today, that is the Côte d'Ivoire. It's also in number there as well. Lotto Soudal, a couple of splits starting to occur, so the racing really is on now. Trek Segafredo, yes, it was a serious move, and they continued that straight over the top. But the advantage of having all of your riders near the front is the fact you've got numbers up in front when it splits as well. Also a rider there from Team Arkea Samsic in the mix as well.
I think that's Tom's Scoins, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt.
It is, I think you're right, it's Tom Scoins, yep.
Putting in a serious attack there, he's putting a lot of riders into difficulties. It's quite a steep gradient as you come through the finish and you hit this climb, and he's attacked at the perfect moment here. He's put a lot of riders under pressure. Looks like Connor Swift just doing a big attack there to try and jump across. As Dries de Bont. Yeah, good move there to get across.
Yep, there's a real strong acceleration that was Dries de Bont just drifting back a little bit now. I'm used to seeing Tom Scoins in his Latvian champions kit, so apologies. But it is back together now. And Lotto Soudal again regain brief control. So into the final lap now of the Famenne Ardenne Classic. A couple of these riders have been jettisoned from the back. Some real stinging accelerations, fragmenting the group. On this long drag. Another attack now from Trek Segafredo. This looks like Alex Kirsch is going clear now. So the tall, rangy rider from Luxembourg. So Trek Segafredo, I mean, they've got head turns, but they're happy quite clearly to get in the mix and try and shuffle things around a bit. Again, once the race is completely back together again, the last thing you want to do is let these teams just take that control. And Dries de Bont, irrepressible as ever, trying to winch himself across the move as well.
Yeah, he jumped straight across to that one, Alpecin de Koning. They don't want to let a move go up the road here without being present, because it's just going to mean they're going to have to get on the front with Lotto Soudal and help chase. But this is what I was slightly worried about for Lotto Soudal, because they brought that breakaway back pretty early and they've got a whole lap here to try and control. And as we see, the attacks are starting to fly, so they've got a good 20k to, ride really hard and control things. It's going to be quite a tough ask. And then as they come onto the Côte d'Ivoire, after jumping on all these moves when they're tired, it's going to be a serious challenge for them. Except for Mark, actually, Matt as well, who's really present in that last attack there with Scoins. Jumped on that straight away, so he looks to be in good form and definitely one to consider in these closing stages.
Yeah, certainly is. Good to see Sepp Van Mark up in the mix. A rider that won't be worried at all about these weather conditions. Still a reasonably sizable group, although we have lost quite a few. 19.8 k's to go. Pace continuing to be set on the front by Lotto Soudal, who have still 6 riders in the mix. They started with 7. They've lost Sebastian Grignard, who did a lot of work early on. They are trying to keep control of this group, and the rider on the front at the moment is Brent van Moor. As I said, they've got a big job to do, but they've managed to sew things back together pretty quickly, and there are several riders from Trek Segafredo. They've got 4 or 5. I can see Ed Turns as well in there. And also on the left-hand side in the white, that is Valentin Ferron. And there is indeed Sepp van Mark on the left-hand side. Tall, powerfully built rider. Just swings in and sits on the wheel of the Frenchman in the white. This is going to be an exciting finale. Could all kick off on the last descent of the Côte d'Ivoire, which is coming in around 5 or 6 K's time. But still, it is Lotto Soudal. They've nailed their colours to the mast today, haven't they? They've taken this race up a long time ago, and they've got another 18 Ks to try and keep control. Clearly, it's all about Arnaud Denis for me. That's what it looks like. But they've got to hold something back for this climb too, to make sure they can cover all the moves.
They do, and we see another attack here from Total Energies going straight off the front. That was a great move. As we approach the Côte d'Ivoire, that is going to be the serious test, I think, for them. They've got to keep things together on the climb after all this chasing, all this work, all day, covering these moves, and the likes of Anthony Turgis, who we see here going off the front, is going to be a real challenge for them as we hit the climb. And if they do keep things together, I think Arnaud Denis is looking pretty good for the finish of this race.
He is indeed. Well, a good move by Anthony Turgis. Very classy rider indeed. Runner-up in the French national road race this year. Second in Milan-San Remo as well, so he's had a great season. He really has. He's a classy bike rider, but hasn't opened up too much of a gap. It's certainly making Lotto Soudal work for this one, and no other team is now doing the chasing. It's just up to one team. Even Alpecin de Koning have dropped away, but this is a good move by Anthony Turgis. He's a rider that can operate well from small moves, but has got a very good kick on him as well. But good riding here by Turgis. He checks the gap. This is looking good, and he looks to be pretty strong there. Nice puissance, looks to be turning the pedals pretty effectively. Backs off into this corner, and there we go. We're on to the final ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. Good little move here by Turgis.
Yeah, really good little move. He's obviously going strong, and this is, I think, what Lotto Soudal will be scared of. It's all well and good, controlling things and following moves and getting the race together on the flat, but when these attacks go on the climb, if you haven't got the legs, you just haven't got the legs, and it's going to be a tough ask to keep this one together after all the work they've done. And I think now Anthony Turgis, he's riding well, but he's also, a bit of a stepping stone for riders in the peloton who are looking to attack themselves. And that's going to make Lotto Soudal's job even harder. But Turgis, he's building up a bit of a gap here. This is a solid one, and they're going to have to really keep tabs on it as we see a rider from Israel Premier Tech look to jump across to him.
Yeah, it looked like the Israel Premier Tech rider was actually riding on the front there, but he's actually opened up a little bit of a gap, turning huge gear, and is trying to get across. I think that's the Israeli rider. It looks like Omar Goldstein trying to get across the gap. Indeed it is Goldstein. It's a good climber. And that's a good little move. So the Israeli rider finds another gear out of the saddle. And this is really starting to kick things off. So it looks as if Turgis is going to be caught. But this has provided a real catalyst. Remember, this is the final ascent of this climb. Turgis looks around and he will see a little group that's just come across to him. Alish Kirsch is there. Connor Swift is also in the mix there as well.
Yeah, that was a serious attack by Goldstein. He's not finished yet either. He just digs on past Turgis. A number of riders really attentive to that attack. Connor Swift in particular doing well to position himself as Alice Kirsch here goes for Trek Segafredo on the right-hand side of the road. So things are really hotting up in the peloton here, and you're going to have to be doing all you can to try and hang on to the wheels of these riders.
Yep. Alexander Kirsch takes a look over his shoulder, and there's a few splits starting to happen now. Goldstein swings across the road, looks for assistance. He can't shut the gap to the rider from Luxembourg, who lifts himself out of the saddle again, leans into this gear, but good riding here. It looks, in fact, that's not Delis himself. Certainly a rider from Lotto Soudal has managed to get back onto the wheel of Kirsch, who then swings across the road. And the rider there, I think from Intermarché, looks to be like a Loic of Liegen. And this is the damage that is being done behind. Riders really struggling to stay in contact in the closing stages of this race. So another attack on the right-hand side. It looks like it's Scoins again who goes. Trek Segafredo are determined to try and make things stick here, aren't they?
Yeah, they're really kind of 1-2 in the bunch here, aren't they? They're trying to get a rider away. They don't want it to come down to a sprint. It's really hanging in the balance here, the race, because the peloton is just staying together. The riders are attacking, but it's not quite, the elastic hasn't quite snapped behind. I think the likes of Scoins now, they'll be looking to kind of really mix things up and take a group with them. They'll want things to split up behind. They'll want that chase and that control to go out to the bunch. And they'll want Lotto Soudal to be losing some riders, as we potentially see the likes of Victor Campenaerts here going into difficulty. So this is exactly what these attacks by Trek Segafredo will be trying to achieve.
Yep, good move here by Tom Scoins. It's not opened up too much of a gap. It's put a lot of riders under pressure. But what it has done, importantly, and depending on your point of view, of course, is that Lotto Soudal are now spread all over the road. But they do have a representation in this front group. Sat in their position number 3 there. And I think that is, in fact, that is Delis. I thought it was Delis. He's so strong, is this young rider. 9 wins this season, the 20-year-old. Their protected rider, and is climbing exceptionally well. Just going over the top, but he's pretty isolated here, though, Connor. And that's the last thing he needs. So he's clearly climbing well, has got very good legs, but he hasn't got any teammates with him.
No, he's having to do a bit of the work himself, which I think is what, you know, they'd have been trying to avoid with the likes of Campenaerts going into difficulty there, and that's a teammate you'd probably be trying to rely on at this stage of the race. He's not quite got the legs to be there, so Delis is having to cover these moves himself. He's obviously on a good day, so, you know, if he does slip away in one of these moves, it's going to be quite hard to beat in the finish. He's doing the right thing, but yeah, this is going to be a tough ride in the last 15 kilometres for Delis to keep himself where he needs to be and not waste too much energy, as we see a few groups going off the back here.
Yeah, I think this is that was a Nicky Terpstra. I think this is either Dries Van Gestel on at the front, or it is Perron. They've only got a few riders in this in the field. One of the smaller teams here, 5 riders from Total Energy. Cofidis represented in this front group as well. So there's a definite split there. We have around 20-25 riders who have managed to go clear over the top of this climb, and significantly you can see him there clear as day, and that is the Belgian road race champion Tim Merlier, just ensconced towards the back of that group. As we see another attack in from Scoins, again determined to try and go clear here.
He really is, isn't he? He's riding out of his skin, just being so aggressive, and I think Trek Segafredo, they've been waiting in the wings to fire these attacks up the road. Alex Kirsch and Tom Scoins, they're doing a cracking job here, trying to set the cat amongst the pigeons. Tim Merlier, he's just tucked into the back of that group, so he's doing well to remain in contention. So they haven't distanced the sprinters just yet, so Scoins is really going to have to persevere with these attacks and try and put those sprinters under pressure, because you're not going to want to bring the likes of Tim Merlier to the line at the end of this race.
One rider that I haven't seen is Benjamin Girmay. I haven't seen him at all, but that rider represented at the front here for Intermarché, about 6th or 7th wheel, is Loic Vliegen. He comes from this area, but I cannot, if you manage to spot Benjamin Girmay, because I haven't actually seen him in this group, as another attack goes on the right hand side from Riwal, although it's neutralised. That is Nortoft, Morten Alling Nortoft tries to go clear. Left hand side is Arkeas Samsic, being closed down by Israel Premier Tech. So no one team dominating at all here. This is real bike racing. There's no real organisation at all now. This is very, very aggressive. It's all about a numbers game here, isn't it?
Yeah, this is just everyone just trying their luck now. That was Clement Rousseau, I believe, for Team Arkeas Samsic. So, you know, the split's gone in the bunch now. That's a sizable gap, and even behind that, you know, there's gaps. There's groups everywhere, really. So now's your chance, if you're feeling good, to go on the attack, and you can win this race from this scenario. This is what it's all about. I haven't seen Benjamin Girmay. I haven't seen him for a while now. It is tough to spot riders, though, when the weather does descend like this. Even when you're in the race, there's that element of... you know, you don't have the same communication, you don't have the same visibility, and it is a bit easier to hide. So I wouldn't discount him just yet, but no, personally, I haven't seen him in the action for a while.
No, you're right. See, this is Sepp Van Mark at the back of that group. Sepp Van Mark is at the back of group number 2. And this looks like it's a teammate of Delis. Again, the motorbike, understandably, just dropping off a little bit to give these riders plenty of space as they run into that corner. Sketchy times here in these wet conditions. And this is a big launch here. Just taking the advantage here. Alex Kirsch is the rider behind in the white of Trek Segafredo, trying to shut down this rider who's attacking off the front. Well, the group is starting to swell a little bit, so there's probably 30, maybe 40 riders in this front group, and we have 12.5 kilometres to go now.
Yeah, there is that chance to get back in because it hasn't quite snapped. The gaps are there, but you can get back in on these descents. The problem is if you get back in, it's too late and another attack's already gone up the road. So the likes of Trek Segafredo here trying to keep those attacks moving, trying to keep the groups going away. Such a technical descent that even if you're in the back of the group, you're struggling. You see all the little gaps back down the line there. This is a really critical moment in this race. And yeah, attacking on the descent is for the brave-hearted when the rain's descending like it is today.
It certainly is. They just briefly go under the motorway, as you can see, or under that little underpass, that little chicane, the shimmy left, then right underneath this technical part of this drop-off, the top of the Côte d'Ivoire. And no one team dominating. Lotto Soudal had it pretty much all their own way until the last ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire. This is Deli. This is Deli, happy to push things on the descent. Never really seen him do this before. He's absolutely flying, is Deli. He's relatively isolated. I cannot spot another rider from Lotto Soudal in that front group. And bearing in mind the amount of riding they've done, no, he's not. There's no other riders from his side. There's one right at the back there. Two, in fact, because that little group, I think, with Victor Campenaerts has managed to sew itself together. But Deli, seemingly, Connor, is happy to try and go on the offensive himself here, or at least make it difficult for everybody else.
Yeah, he's really riding out of his skin. I mean, he's almost taking the initiative, isn't he? And just going for it and trying not to be caught out by anyone and just putting himself in the front so that he's kind of saying, if you want to go, then you have to come across to me, and he's going to be there regardless. So real show of strength by him. I think it's almost better to ride like this because when it's so lined out, as we see, if we look behind, I mean, you don't want to be caught out back there. You're just wasting so much energy and the gaps are starting. It just takes one person to drop the wheel and you're done for. So it's almost better to stay at the front and keep yourself out of danger, as we see Alex Kirsch again for Trek Segafredo forcing the pace with Deli right on his wheel.
Yeah, well, Deli, as you said, clearly got very, very good legs. Clearly rides well in these conditions. Sat on the wheel of Alex Kirsch. And now we're going to see an attack on the right-hand side. That's definitely the figure of Connor Swift, the former British road race champion for Arkea Samsic. But immediately on his wheel is Ed Turns. Ed Turns is there also on the wheel. It looks as if it's Lawrence Nassen as well. And now we're looking at the figure there. Oh, a flat tyre, unfortunately, for Greg Van Avermaet. That is very, very unfortunate for the former Olympic road race champion. A critical time. And that is very, very disappointing for him.
Oh, you'd be gutted, wouldn't you? That's just the worst moment of a puncture. 10k to go, and with groups all over the road, I mean, you're not getting back into the action. You're going to get back into a group, but it's too late, you know, to find your way back. And just like I said, a bit of trouble.
He couldn't even take his wheel out. That was neutral service. He didn't even have the Allen key to take his rear wheel out. That is bitterly disappointing for Van Avermaet. He was in that front group, was a relatively big front group, but I think with only 9.5 kilometres to go now, it is going to be difficult from the man from AG2R Citroën to get back in contact. But that's the very nature of racing, but never good to see. So we're now at the final 9 kilometres of this edition of the Famenne Ardenne Classic. 9 kilometres to go. A flick of the elbow there from Lionel Terminot of Belgium. One rider has managed to clip off. And that's a rider from Cofidis. Can't quite identify him just yet, but he's been brought back to heel pretty quickly. Ed Turns on the front here, bringing back the man from Cofidis. 8.8 Ks to go. No one team controlling things at all here. This is going to be a fascinating finale, but things have just lulled. So the group, Connor, has swelled a little bit, and I think there's some key men that have got back in contact now.
Yeah, definitely. The group has swelled, hasn't it? Things managed to come back together a little bit on that descent, but I'm almost watching this and I'm just waiting for one rider to put in a really decisive attack and get that gap. Because over these last few kilometres, we just see attack after attack, and I'm sure there's plenty of tired bodies in the peloton there, especially after things, you know, breaking and coming back together, and you see this lull. It's the perfect moment for an attack, so I'm just waiting really for someone to launch one.
I think you're right. I think you're Yep, there's the first one on the right-hand side. It looks like it's Danielos, actually. Yeah, Danielos, the tall and rangy rider from Total Energies. It's either Os or Van Gestel, actually, the Belgian. But that little move hasn't snapped the elastic at all. All it's essentially doing right now is just bringing this group along, carrying this group, that racing momentum. In fact, at the back there, I think that is Anthony Telgi or Nicky Topes. So Total Energies have good representation. 7.7 kilometres to go now. And I'm wondering who the rider is from Bolton Equities. Is that Aaron Gate? Because so many riders here have their gilets still on their capes. Difficult to pick out the numbers, but it does look like it might be Aaron Gate in the mix there.
Yeah, that's Aaron Gate for sure. I can recognise his style. I've ridden with him enough times to know it's Gatey. So, yeah, Commonwealth Games World gold medalist this year, and he's still in the action. Solid sprint, so he's obviously riding well, and he's marking these moves. So I think if you see Gatey get away in a little group here, he could definitely take the win.
Sepp Van Mark goes over the top. So Van Mark goes immediately brought to heel, but this should open things up for somebody else to go straight over the top. The Belgian swings over to the left-hand side. Nobody wanted to give a rider of such class any leeway at all, any sort of gap. He always remains a big, big threat. So briefly, hostilities have settled down. Now remember, we've still got that long drag. It's about a 1,500-metre long drag. I can just see also a significant rider there for Arkea Samsic, Hugo Hofstetter. They've got such good sprinters, Arkea Samsic. Watch out for Capio and Hofstetter. Difficult to understand which will be the leader. I think in conditions like this, and given this selection, they might just have to agree between themselves and have a conversation. Just get a sense of who's got good legs. And that's what those conversations will happen at this point in the race, won't they?
Yeah, definitely. I think there'll be a plan made now with the riders they've got available to them, see who survived, who's feeling good, who's managed to get themselves in this front group here, and then it will be a case of deciding, where we're going to place those resources, who we're going to ride for, if we're potentially going to let two riders, go for the sprint. But hats off to Lotto Soudal. I mean, that was a really tricky moment in the race there. Dali had to cover a few moves himself, yet still he's managed to get two more teammates back up there to the front with him and control things. As we just hit this final drag up to the finish, we descend down into the town. We've seen it on each lap that this has been a really tricky point, and riders have been put under difficulties. Connor Swift moves up there with pace on the right hand side.
Yep, Swift looking good. Looking at Tim Merlier just on the inside there, slightly obscured. There he is in that wonderful Belgian champions kit. He's looking good, and he's been riding very cagey. Hasn't followed any of these moves, and that is, you can just see Aaron Gate on the left hand side moving up kindly. There he is, with the black overshoes, black helmet, and that fluo yellow kit with the blue sleeves, just emptying his nostrils there. So watch out for him. He's a potent threat. He really, really is. And there's an attack on the left, on the right hand side from Tergis. Tergis goes up this big drag, winds up the gear, and has opened up daylight immediately. Takes a glance round, and the Frenchman is clear. Good move here by Tergis.
Yeah, another solid attack. We saw him go clear on the Côte d'Ivoire, and he did a similar move, but this is a much closer distance to the finish, so this one pays off. It is a really serious attack. Good moment to go. Lotto Soudal, they've done well to get themselves to the front, but they're definitely starting to lack a bit of firepower. They're starting to lack a bit of energy, and these attacks are looking increasingly successful. They've been attacked all the way into the finish here. Stander Wolf, Rage Tour, just trying to close this move to Anthony Tergis, and if you can get across these two riders at the front, it'll prove quite difficult to bring back, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. If you can get over the top of this drag, it then drops down. So Tergis, he's got a gap of just 3 or 4 seconds, 5 or 6 seconds maximum, as another attack goes on the right-hand side. This is another big move. Good attack there again. This is Goldstein again. So Goldstein's riding well. Attacked on the final ascent of the Côte d'Ivoire, and is gone straight past Stander Wolf. So Goldstein riding exceptionally strongly, but what he's doing for Lotto Soudal is giving them that little bit of a stepping stone. It's always nice to have somebody in the middle just to work towards, but Tergis glances around, centre of the road, out of the saddle again. It almost looks like he was starting to cramp up there. He really started to slow as we look at Sepp Van Mark. His face, well, it's a classic Belgian visage, isn't it? That is Belgian toothpaste, I think everybody's got in their mouths at the moment. There's good riding here by Goldstein, straight past the man from France. And TLG's struggling to get on. Well, it's an impressive ride by the Israeli rider here.
Yeah, he's riding really strongly, actually. Solid attack there. Brilliant move by Goldstein. And he just needs to do all he can now to try and stay away over the top of this climb, because we've seen it each lap, descent down into town. It's quite technical, it's quite narrow. It's lined the peloton out on occasion, so if you can get into those few corners, that little part of the finishing part of this race, then you can definitely stand a chance of staying away.
Now this is Florian Vermeersch on the back. Of course, a runner-up in Paris-Roubaix previously, and on his in front of him, the winner of Paris-Roubaix in the form of Nicky Terpstra. Now these two riders are starting to move clear. This is very interesting. 4 kilometres to go, and a big attack on the right-hand side by one of the Sport Vlaanderen riders. Again, his number slightly obscured, can't ID him just yet, but under 4 kilometres to go. They're over the top of that long drag. Then they essentially go into a bowl, and it climbs up for the last kilometre. So a fast-moving bunch now. Goldstein still on the front, and tucked into his slipstream from France is Anthony Telgi, but it does look like this might all come back together again here, Connor.
It's really hanging into the balance, isn't it? Lots of it out. They've lost a rider. There's no one quite chasing. It's just attacks flying. Arkea Samsic now trying to bring things together. As we said before, they have a few sprinters here. They have Hofstede. They have the likes of Connor Swift hanging in the balance map.
Just over 3 kilometres to go now in the Famenne Ardenne Classic Belgian weather, and we have 2 riders dangling off the front now in the closing kilometres of what has been an intriguing race so far. Omar Goldstein is the man in second position, but the man just on the front there from Total Energy, the runner-up this year in Milan-San Remo, is Anthony Telgi, but they only have a slender lead as the road starts to descend before it picks up again into the finish. We've still got to go through a very technical town centre in Marche in Famenne, but at the moment they are rocketing down this descent. A brief little bit of respite, and the 2 riders that were in front are about to be caught, and it is Arkea Samsic now shutting down the gaps, Connor.
Yeah, it looks like it's all coming together on this descent. There's going to be some nervous moments in this group as we go through town. Such a narrow little section as you descend down this bit, and then you go through the high street of the town, and everyone's trying to position themselves at the front here. It's going to be really key. If you get caught out now, then you're really going to hamper your chances. Rory Townsend, Irish national champion, he's still in the mixed edge on the right-hand side, went out of our shot. This is where we're... Great to see him in the mix. There he is, just on the inside there, clearly identifiable. That's a jersey you know very, very well. This is that technical section now, 1,700 metres to go. The road narrows, that pinch point through the roundabout, underneath the bridge, and then we go through the town centre with those different changing surfaces, go through the Flamme Rouge, then take a technical right, and then it's 700 metres, and they can see the line a long way off, and it is at the front. At the moment, it is Alex Kirsch. They'll be looking after Ed Turns, who is in that group. Arkea Samsic also riding hard. It looks like they might be protecting Amaury Capio at the moment. And also in the mix on the right-hand side there, coming through to the front, is Jasper de Boist looking after Arnaud Delis. Here's that little right-hander into the town. At the moment, it's advantage Lotto Soudal. Yep, they've ridden a perfect race. They've managed to get things still together in this closing kilometre. I'm not sure how they've done that, because the attacks have been absolutely flying. Rider from Trek just gets caught out on the pavement there on the right. Edward Toons is up there. He's got the sprint. He can win this sort of race. Tim Merlier nicely positioned in around 6th or 7th wheel. Belgian national champion. He's right where he needs to be. He's hung on over these climbs. Trek Segafredo, they've obviously changed tactics to work for Edward Toons, and that has helped keep things together. We see the crash go down.
I'm not too sure who that is. Straight back on the bike. That was very quick, almost cyclocross style. I'm not too sure which rider that was. Whether it was Arnaud Delis or one of his teammates. I can't tell from here. But Jasper de Boist is on the front. Well, I've never seen somebody crash and dismount with such elegance in my life. What a fascinating crash there. I'm not too sure who it was, but at the moment it is Arkea Samsic on the front. We've got 400 metres to go, and they're starting to wind things up for the sprint now. I think Lotto Soud have actually lost their sprinter now, so Hugo Hofstetter is in the mix now. But winding things up on the front is Pierre Goprat of AG2R. This is going to be a fascinating sprint. A couple of bits of bumping and barging there as Tim Merlier opens things up on the right-hand side. Connor Swift is in the centre here, and it's Ed Turns on the right-hand side. Who's going to take this one? It's difficult to see. All this is going to be a fascinating sprint to the line. Looks like it is Arkea Samsic in the centre. Well, this is a traction on the right-hand side. Oh, it is. It looks like Zongler's going to take it. It looks like Axel Zongler took it on the right-hand side at the very last. The man from Cofidis emerged from the melee to take the win. What an absolutely superb sprint that was by the Frenchman.
Oh my goodness, I need to recover myself after that. What a finish.
There was a lot going on there.
What a win by this man. That was some sprint to the end.
Indeed, Axel Zongler was indeed the winner, but he came from nowhere but timed it to perfection. It was difficult to unpick that sprint. There was so much going on. It was almost, Connor, a sprint in slow motion, but this man quite clearly did it the quickest for his third win of the season.
Mighty impressive, mighty impressive. He kept a cool head there with all the attacks going, and it came together for him in the end. Axel Zongler, what a sprint. It looked like they all kind of misjudged where the finish line was. It looked like they all went kind of 100 metres too early, and everyone kind of started a sprint again at one point. I can't wait to see that one back, because that's one of the longest sprints I think I've ever seen in a bike race. Rory Townsend there as well. I think he was up there in the top 10, Irish national champion. Great ride by him. I think it was that crash there by Ardenne. I can't believe that, with that final corner, that last right-hander. He went down super hard, and I feel for the guy, because, that was a tough one. He'd ridden a brilliant race, and that's bike race. It just doesn't work out sometimes.
Yep. Seeing a couple of riders come off on that corner, Delis will be bitterly disappointed. A pat on the shoulder there from his fellow countryman, Oliver Nelson. Well, let's have a look at this again. Just try and unpick this one. So you could write a book on what happened in this final kilometre. This is the right-hander. Just talk us through this.
Yeah, so this is the last right-hander, and it looks like he just goes into the saddle and tries to accelerate again. And we saw a crash here a few laps before. Just loses the back wheel, slips out, and he goes down, and his teammates, I don't think, even realised. So they kept on riding, and it was too late. There's no getting back from that. I mean, he jumps back on his bike quicker than I've ever seen anyone jump back on a bike before. Yeah. But it was too late. The sprint started. Edgewater went on the right. Arkea Samsic did a good job in the closing kilometres to try and keep things together. But Zongler, I mean, he's still quite far back at this stage. He's kind of 10th rider there. Merlier doing all he can to get out there with the solid shoulder barge on the right. And everyone appears to kind of start their sprint quite early. Tim Merlier goes, he's got good acceleration, he gets blocked in a few times. He goes again, gets blocked in once more. Zongler finds a way through on the left. See that? I mean, he gets blocked in about 3 times. But Zongler's the one who finds a clear road on the left, and he takes the win by a nice margin in the end.
Was that Connor Swift on the right hand? It's difficult, or was it? No, I don't think it was. But like you see, Zong did a great ride. I mean, at this point, you couldn't see him from the aerial shot, but there he is, because he was right on the inside, totally boxed in, but it all unfurled just in the last 100 metres, even the last 75 metres of this race. There was some acceleration by the Frenchman. In the end, I think he took it by nearly a length. Definitely, I think it might have been, it was difficult to see who was actually second there, whether it was Capio or Connor Swift, or maybe even Rousseau. They were very similar built riders. Well, a breathless finish to the Famenne Ardenne Classic. I hope you enjoyed that one. We certainly did. So this is the closing few metres, and on the right-hand side, the man from Cofidis is actually sprinting on the hoods, which is pretty unusual. But it did it to devastating effect. In the end, I mean, it looked like he was doing it. He won it easily in the end, didn't he?
He did, didn't he? It looked like everyone kind of followed Merlier, and rightly so. I mean, he'd probably be the sprinter you'd look to in that scenario. And everyone kind of went on the rides, and everyone just kept getting blocked in. Merlier was blocked in, everyone was blocked in behind him. Zongler found the clear road on the left, and accelerated on the tops to brilliant effect to take the win. I think it was Oliver Narsson in third place there for AG2R2.
Yeah, it was indeed Henri Capio in third. Hofstetter also in the mix there for the men in red. But no doubt about the winner, Axel Zongler of Cofidis. What a good year have Cofidis. They really have. A good to consistent season, 8th recently in the Grand Prix Wallonie. And 4th overall in the Arctic race of Norway, as well as winning the opening stage, 3rd in the French National Road Race Championships, and won earlier this year, back in April, La Route Adèle de Vitre. So he is a classy rider, and importantly has been consistent from the start of the season right the way through to the end as well. So there's a lovely view of Marche en Famenne from the air. We've had drizzly rain for the vast majority of the day, and interesting, I was doing a little bit of research about this town, Connor, and there's a folk dance troupe that do Walloon dancing that are known as La Pluvinette, which means fine drizzle in French.
There you go. I love it. I mean, they're obviously used to fine drizzle around here.
They are indeed. It's the sort of rain, Connor, that wets you through.
It does, doesn't it? And we've said it all race. It's so hard to ride a bike in it. So fair play to all the riders who've managed to race to great effect today, because it's not an easy task, especially when the cold starts to descend in this particular part of the world.
Indeed. Well, that's the Wallonie Expo. That's where the race started earlier on today. Started and finished, should I say, in Marche en Famenne. An entertaining race and a very, very exciting finale. Unfortunate for Arnaud Delis, but a very technical. They were sprinting all on the right-hand side, weren't they? It shows maybe where that little bit of wind was coming from. But Merlier looked to have a lot of momentum, but just on a couple of occasions was boxed in. I don't actually think anybody was at fault. He just opted for the side. There was just no space, and sometimes that happens in sprinting, doesn't it? Even though you've got good legs, if you're not in the right position and can't find the gaps, it's just the way it goes. But this was a fascinating sprint in slow motion, and when the camera zooms out in a minute, we'll see how far back Axel Zongel was, and at the moment he's actually on the wheel of the Belgian champion. And this is where he came, well, there's a bit of a shoulder barge there, not really a barge, just a coming that almost came together. And look how boxed in Zongel is at the moment here as well, right on the inside. And from here, Connor, there's almost nowhere to go for Zongel.
No, he finds himself boxed in on the right too. It's almost like everyone kind of misjudges the finish and sees Merlier out the saddle sprinting and opens up. But Zongel does an absolutely brilliant job to thread his way through. He was on Merlier's wheel there on the right, and he just finds that little bit of space behind Hofstede to get through to the left and find the clear road. I have no idea how Merlier did not crash in this finish. He hit his wheels about 2 or 3 times with Capio in front, and he manages to keep it upright. In the end, he kind of pulls himself out of the sprint, finishing in 6th or 7th position. But yeah, Zongel, I mean, brilliant leg, brilliant ride, but absolutely cracking job to thread his way through those final riders there.
Yeah, that was a very difficult last few 100 metres. Well, last 100 metres for Tim Merlier. Just kept going on the inside, and his back wheel went actually just they went over that. He was just trying to accelerate through on the inside, and there wasn't any space. And just by his body language there, he couldn't get through on the inside. Capio was sprinting straight, maybe moved ever so slightly right, but there's nothing. He didn't exactly shut the door. There was just no space for Merlier to go through. And then, you know, when a rider gets frustrated, when they're angry with another rider, there's a lot of remonstration, but there was none of that, was there? He just got his line wrong, and there was just no space for him to move up.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was really in the wrong there. It was just kind of a racing scenario, to be honest. Merlier chose to go right. I think when you look at that replay and you look at when he decided to go right, it was almost a better option. There was equal parts to the road on right and left free. He went for it, and just the way that the race moved, he was boxed in.
Totally. Well, there's the confirmation of the win for Axel Zongel ahead of Omri Capio. 3rd place, Oliver Narsson of AG2R Switch. And then we have Hugo Hofstetter. The second have 2 in the top 4 for Arcaire Samzik. And we have Hugo Page, Jenti Bermans, Tim Merlier, Edward Turns, William Boivin, former winner of this race. And rounding out the top 10, great ride by the Irish road race champion Rory Townsend of With Songod. So, well, thank you very much indeed for watching us. I hope you've enjoyed that one. I certainly did. But for now, from me and from Connor, it is goodbye. You take care, and we'll see you soon. So, just looking back at the highlights of today's race, we had a six-rider group, should I say, that dominated the day. Gage Hecht of the Human Powered Health Team, Michael Zilliard of Volker Vessels, Matthew Teggett of Wib Sungod, and these two riders, that's Vinbo of Rewal and a Stewart of Bolton Equities. They were the final two riders out in front. Most of the work for the majority of the day had been done by Lotto Soudal, and the final man to be caught by the breakaway was Emil Vinbo, caught just at the foot of the final categorised climb of the day, the Côte d'Ivoire. But then coming into the final, right-hander, disaster struck for one of the pre-race favourites. 9 wins on the board for Arnaud Delis. Despite a very quick remounting, it wasn't to be for the 20-year-old Belgian. And with 700 metres to go, it was chaos all round, almost a slow-motion sprint, but somehow, incredibly from the melee, Axel Zongel on the right-hand side there for Cofidis, stamped on the pedals and accelerated through into space, had time to look around and enjoy his third victory of the year. So good ride by the Cofidis rider. Again, just showing us how strong he is, how capable a sprinter he is. And clearly, he's got a nose for the wins. The way he poured himself out of nowhere to take the win was mightily impressive. Yeah, good win. It looked, with about 150 metres to go, that the win certainly wouldn't come from him. It caught me by surprise, calling that one through, Connor. But no, an exciting win and a well-fought battle, I think, for today's race.
Yeah, definitely well-deserved win there to take the end result. I was just looking actually in that replay as well and seeing where Arnaud Delis finished up, crashing on that final corner. We commented at the moment how quickly he remounted his bike, but I think he finished in the top 15 still. Incredible. He got back on, you see him sprinting behind, he gets back into contention. That was just unbelievable to do that in the closing kilometre, to crash and still get up there, back of your bike and finish around top 15. So yeah, remarkable. Yeah, really remarkable finish as well. I mean, there's a lot going on. That crash by Delis just seemed to set the cat amongst the pigeons, and suddenly it was all up for grabs. I think everyone almost got a bit too kind of aggressive in their sprint, knowing that Delis was out of the action, and that's why things opened up a little earlier than perhaps they would have done. Merlier getting boxed in, but yeah, can't take the win away from Axel Zongler. That was a cracking result, and yeah, really well deserved.
Indeed, well, that's 18 wins. He's haven't got the records from all the Cofidis years, wins over the last few years, but that has got to be one of their best years in terms of just wins. They've won across the board. They really have. But win number 3 for the young Frenchman, whose stock will certainly be rising after putting away some classy riders in that finish today.
Yeah, definitely. I think on all the one-day races that I've commentated on this year in Belgium and Northern France throughout the year, he's been really figuring strongly and been up there. So yeah, definitely one to watch in the years to come, and I think he'll be targeting increasingly bigger races. I think we're about to hear from the man himself.
My apologies if the audio isn't coming through. If you can hear it, that's great. We unfortunately can't, so apologies for that.
Ouais, c'est vrai que la chute d'Arnaud, c'était assez chaud parce que je suis arrivé derrière lui. Puis après, le tout c'était de pas se faire enfermer dans la dernière ligne droite, de pouvoir faire l'effort. Et je pensais que j'étais enfermé, et puis finalement ça s'est ouvert devant moi et j'ai vu que les mecs devant perdaient de la vitesse. Donc je me suis un peu coupé, j'ai descendu trop les dents, donc je tirais un peu gros pour faire mon effort, mais j'ai vu que j'arrivais à remonter. Donc voilà, j'arrive avec plus de vitesse et du coup j'ai vu que j'allais gagner, donc j'ai pu savourer un peu.
Ouais, parce que du coup vous étiez gros braqué, vous êtes allé, vous avez gagné avec une belle avance, vous avez même pu profiter de cette victoire.
Ouais, comme c'était une arrivée à monter, c'est vrai que je voyais que j'avais plus de vitesse, donc ouais, j'ai pu profiter. Et puis je suis super content, c'est depuis quelques semaines j'avais une forme un peu aléatoire, une fois ça allait, à l'entraînement, après en cours j'avais un peu de mal. Donc là je suis content, j'ai retrouvé des sensations a priori. Aujourd'hui je me sentais super bien et je suis content d'avoir bien négocié ce final aussi, parce que c'est pas toujours facile. Donc,
it's never easy in racing.
Saison, et puis,
it's good for the confidence at the end of the year.
Même si c'est pas encore fini.
And I'm finishing the season on a good note.
Vous étiez avec lui sur le podium. C'était sur le circuit de Wallonie. Vous terminez deuxième. C'est une victoire aujourd'hui. Il avait dit ça, c'est un des grands prometteurs.
Ah bah merci Philippe.
C'est que
c'est vrai que c'est quelqu'un de très sympa et il a toujours un mot gentil pour les jeunes. Et donc je suis honoré d'entendre ça.
Et votre prochaine course, c'est déjà mardi?
Oui, à Binche-Chez-Méminche, et puis ensuite j'enchaînerai aussi à Paris-Bourges et Paris-Tour. Donc c'est une saison encore chargée.
Merci beaucoup, félicitations.
Yeah, interesting. From what I could pick out there, said that he thought that all the doors were closed with that 150 metres to go, but it opened up, and quite often that is the way sprinting is, especially in a sprint like that. It was a low speed. It was a low-speed sprint, really. It was a fascinating one to see. It was the young rider from, it was Pierre Godtoat, 19-year-old, actually, and a rider we don't know too much about. It's a stagiaire for AG2R Citroën, who opened things up early. On his wheel at the moment it is Amaury Capio. And again, let's look back again at where eventual winner Axel Zongle is. Caught on the right-hand side. There's that little coming together with Tim Merlier, who has a lot of space here. And look at this little gap that Zongle goes through on the right-hand side, still manages to get onto the wheel. And it's that little bit there that he just threads himself through that little bit that's just out of our camera shot. And there he is, finds the space here, waits, and this was key, decides to go left rather than right. And that was the moment that the race was won for him, wasn't it? Because he opted for that space on the right-hand side. Merlier lost all his momentum. In fact, when he kicked there, his back wheel went, and then that was it for him. He lost all his momentum, all his drive, and in the end it was by just over a length that Zongle won it. So certainly a lot happened there, but a great ride by Axel Zongle of Cofidis, rounding out this season very, very strongly for the French team. So that was the Famenne Ardenne Classic for 2022. It's been a pleasure commentating, but for me, Matt Stevens, and from Connor Dunn, for now it's goodbye, and we'll see you very soon.
Au club de fabrication